Hello and welcome to EXP Required, where we talk about Final Fantasy and other things. I'm Jack, and as always, I'm joined by Mole. How are you doing, Mole?
You know what, Jack? I want to say I'm excited for today's episode. I can't quite bring myself to manage that. Something about today's topic has inspired me to alternate between, fist pumping and groaning in despair, and I'm really excited to talk about it with you. Not necessarily been so excited to revisit the concept as a whole, though.
Just to frame it as usual, the severe heat has not helped with that.
Oh, no, not at all.
The fact that we are living in the 4 days of summer of the UK and it's 8 million degrees Celsius here, where it's just 20 degrees elsewhere, has made that harder because we are talking about Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII, the biggest mixed bag in the universe, I think is fair to say. Do you not think that's fair to say?
The only thing that I can think is the fact that it's Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII and not Final Fantasy VII Crisis Core fucks me off.
Which sets the tone for the episode, I think.
It really does. So, getting into it, Jack, I've got a question for you.
Oh God, what are you going to ask me?
How would you define a hero?
Someone that eats apples, apparently.
Apples? What?
Yeah, dumb apples. Got to eat dumb apples to be a hero.
Oh, I hate that.
Yeah.
I hate that, and I can't believe I didn't get it first.
A hero is defined as by Bonnie Tyler in the hit 80s song, I Need a Hero. Sung in Shrek 2 by, I think it was...
Jennifer English.
Can't remember. Jennifer English, yeah. Someone. Jennifer English? Jennifer Saunders.
Oh, shit!
Jennifer English. Jennifer English is in Expedition 33. Imagine her.
I'd love to hear that.
That'd be good.
Actually.
Her singing "I Need a Hero" by Bonnie Tyler. Yeah. So it was by Bonnie Tyler, wasn't it? I don't know. Who knows? We're just trying to avoid the topic of Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII. So what do I think defines a hero? Well, it's probably Zack, isn't it? I know.
He really is the crux of this whole thing.
Yes, he is definitely the something of this whole thing. But okay, so as usual, we talk about these games, we frame them with when they're released. So Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII was first released on the PSP in 2007, September the 13th in Japan. It was then released in 2008 on March the 25th on PSP in North America, and then June the 20th, 2008 on PSP in Europe and Australia, so slightly afterwards in Europe as per usual. The next release of Crisis Core, which we will talk about in a little bit more detail a bit later, was the Crisis Core FF7 Reunion. I have no idea if that's the correct order of the title, whether it's Reunion Final Fantasy VII Crisis Core or Reunion 7 Final Fantasy VII Crisis Core. I mean, honestly, Sesame Street would be having a field day with this. That came out on December the 13th, 2022, just in time for Christmas, worldwide on PS4, PS5, PC, Switch, Xbox One, and the Xbox Series as well. So a game that was neglected by Square, considering how popular it was. It didn't come out for a long, long time, and it was basically given a very big lick of paint a much later date. So we'll get to that in a bit. But the reason it was called Reunion was so that it aligns with the current remake project of having an R title after every game. So bringing it into the 2020s.
You nearly said the 25th century there, didn't you?
It's the 21st century, I nearly said. You think it's the 25th century? Imagine how many Crisis Cores remakes there'll be by then.
No, I don't
We'll
want to.
all be heroes by then in our own VR environment. So I'm going to ask you, what are your personal memories with this one?
At the time Crisis Core came out, I was 16, going on 17, and later on in my 17th year, I left home for the first time. It was a very tumultuous time in my life, but it was also the first time that I was able to start buying stuff with my own money. I don't think any more school children in this country get EMA, which is a real shame because that 30 quid a week saved my life. And by saving it up, I was able to purchase some very irresponsible items, not the first time or the last time this would ever happen in my life, I assure you, which included my Nintendo DS and also my Sony PlayStation Portable, both secondhand, of course. Now, at the time, I was very much of the opinion of, I'm going to buy this handheld console for one thing only, Final Fantasy, and I did end up getting other games for both of these systems. But yeah, Crisis Core was definitely the thing that I got the PSP for, because I was like, okay, Zack's role is finally getting expanded on. I'm really excited that other people are finally going to learn about Zack, and I get to see how everything... Oh, yeah, boy, I saw how everything shook up. It changed my life, not necessarily for the better, but it's now got Gact in it. That's the most important thing, I think. Yeah, sorry, had to bring him up this early. My takeaway from Crisis Core was... it was enjoyable. I liked playing it. It wasn't the pinnacle of good writing. It wasn't even the pinnacle of moderate writing, in my opinion, and that opinion still holds today, quite frankly. But it was fun, you know? It's just a bit of silly fun with a very peppy protagonist and a lot of faces that I already knew and already loved. It came at a decent time in my life when I needed some good distractions, so, it was perfect at the time that I received it and was able to play it, and somehow it endured. Crisis Core has remained part of the Final Fantasy discussion sphere, I suppose, since 2007, 2008, which is kind of incredible considering the game that I really want to see, which is also part of the Final Fantasy VII compilation, still hasn't been released in the West. I'm looking at you, Before Crisis. Where the fuck are you, Before Crisis? I'll never let this go, and I don't even care if Ever Crisis finally gets around to releasing. It's not... I want the original Before Crisis, Jack. You don't understand. Don't understand.
Believe me, I understand. So my personal memories with it, I've got interestingly quite similar to yours. So obviously I got my PSP in December 2007, not for Christmas, but it was the first thing I bought with my own money from my job. I worked at Iceland, actually, Iceland Foods, and this was my first job, and I remember having £200 in my account, and my mind was blown, which at the time wasn't quite enough to buy a PSP, but I think with all the money I had over the 3 weeks I worked, maybe like 400 or 500 quid, it was enough to buy a PSP with a bunch of games. Now, obviously, Crisis Core wasn't out at that point, but it's difficult for me to dissociate the memory of that game with getting a PSP. I didn't have it in December 2007. I got the, the Sega collection and stuff like that, and played some of the Sonic games with Save States and Phantasy Star and Tekken Dark Resurrection and a bunch of other stuff on PSP. And it was really like me being a bit kind to myself, because obviously around that time, the story I've told around not feeling I could fit in with everyone playing Final Fantasy 12 at the time and feeling I was left behind with that. The PSP was my distraction from that and my little thing. And also because I'd been a bit of a Nintendo fanboy for a couple of years, and I was like, oh, the DS is way better than the PSP. And the fact that I'd learned Crisis Core was coming, and the fact I was a big Final Fantasy fan, even I at that point went, you know what, I can't pretend it's better anymore. I have to get a PSP. You can watch films on this. You can listen to music. I'm sorry, but it's just a no-brainer.
You can even go on the internet with it.
Yeah, and I think that the PSP, I don't know what version I had, but I had a slightly slimmer PSP. And by that point, essentially, I think the battery life was better, because one of the problems with the original PSP was the battery life, and it had dead pixels, and it wasn't as efficient at being portable, whereas the more slick and up-to-date version was a bit more reliable. So actually, a lot of those things have been ironed out. Actually getting the game at some point the next year, again, like I say, it's all tied in together. I never beat it, but I remember playing the first few missions quite a bit. Obviously, I hadn't really beaten Final Fantasy VII at that point, so I didn't understand the intricacies of Zack or anything like that. I'd played Midgar a lot, and I think I really, fell in the same with exploring this more 3D world of the first realization of what eventually became Remake, of how these characters would look in 3D.
Yeah.
I think for me, expanding on what you said around, you wanting to experience this, to me, I think it was a technical marvel, even ignoring the Final Fantasy elements of it. The fact that, the DS and the PSP came out, we finally have 3D on portable consoles.
Yeah.
And there were some phones that were powerful enough to have 3D games. This was like, oh my God, look at the graphics on this onto a handheld, and the sound and everything like that, like a fully fledged, almost looked like a film, was just incredible. I think even looking at the somewhat dated graphics on the PSP version now, I'm still amazed this came out so early,
Yeah, I mean, in hindsight, with all of the technology that we have now, it seems so banal, really. Yeah, of course they had 3D games on a portable console. That's just de jure now. No,
Yeah.
It really was a huge deal. I remember, I think it was especially the 3DS with the DS Pass, the connection friend pass thing. That was a huge thing at my school. People were bringing in the DSs, they could pass people in the corridors and be like, oh, I've made a friend or whatever. A huge deal. And the fact that, yeah, you know what? I'm going to say it this early. I think the PSP version looks better. Doesn't look better in terms of how many polygons there are, because you can count them and they are very, very crunchy. However, I do prefer the stylization of the PSP's version.
I know what you're saying. I don't know if I necessarily agree with thinking it looks better, but I do understand looking at the PSP aesthetic.
Yeah.
I think, and I do like the user interface on the PSP better, because the user interface for the remake or the reunion version is a lot more aligned with the remake project. Yeah. This has its own style and just has that kind of 2000s, this is new, Nokia 3310 vibe going on for me. So I completely agree with you there. I totally understand why you think that, and I in some ways empathise. In some ways, I'm not too sold on the new one as being that they have incredible graphics, but I'm also not sort of so married to it that I'd sort of argue with you at any point, to be honest with you. So.
I will say the realization of Crisis Core being the first proper 3D, full 3D, not just 3D characters on a 2D background. They managed to scale up the places and the locations that you are in Final Fantasy VII fantastically in Crisis Core. Like, I remember wandering around the Shinra building being like, holy fuck, like, I'm finally here. Like, the science floor, where you can do a bunch of, I think you can do a few missions there, and you go back there later on in the story as well, like, spinning around, seeing the big specimen tank and being able to, like, walk up to it.
Yeah.
Oh, that absolutely blew my mind. And I know there's a few other little locations, like walking around Midgar for the first time properly, and, like, at Zack's level, seeing it all. Oh, fucking incredible. Then, years and years later, Remake came out, and getting to go back to Midgar and back to the world of Final Fantasy VII in a 3D realised environment. I remember walking around a few of those exact same locations and being like, this looks different. This isn't exactly one-to-one Midgar. And then, of course, because Remake came out and then they put out Reunion, jumping from one to the other was really, really trippy because they didn't change anything about Crisis Core Reunion. It's those exact environments rendered better. I think it's in the Unreal Engine 4. But yeah, you know, they are exactly how they should look in the original game, not in the remake world. And it was very weird to walk around and be like, I should recognize this from Remake, but I recognize it from the OG and people won't. And if people are coming into this, I can imagine there'd be quite a lot of very confused first-timers to Crisis Core.
Definitely. I think that's something we can probably delve into a little bit later on and when we talk about Reunion in a bit more detail. But it is interesting how, you know, this particular project kind of became the template for that remake project in terms of its aesthetic. In a way. I mean, obviously, I think this is probably a good time to talk about the game's release and pre-release. So this is obviously, as you've alluded to here, is part of the compilation of Final Fantasy VII, which obviously started with Advent Children, the movie we've talked about before. I've got it here that it consists of, and I think this is expanded now, correct me if I'm wrong, that it has Before Crisis Final Fantasy, you've talked about, which came out on mobiles in Japan, or cell phones in Japan.
The NTT Docomo, I believe.
FOMO was the name of the network, I believe, but it's more like FOMO for us because it's fear of missing out, or it's ROMO because it's reality of missing out. And then we obviously had Last Order, Final Fantasy VII we'll get into in a little bit, which is the anime movie from 2005. Advent Children was 2005. Dirge of Cerberus, Final Fantasy VII was 2006. And Crisis Core, Final Fantasy VII was this action RPG from 2007. Now, looking this up, I was surprised by that because I thought that the whole idea of the, you know, these kind of leaving Last Order out for a second, the kind of four core elements of the compilation were that you'd have AC, Advent Children, and then you'd have BC, Before Crisis, CC, Crisis Core, and then DC, Dirge of Cerberus. So you'd go through in letters. And then Ever Crisis is EC, so whatever. Now, it's interesting that they come out in a completely different order than that because Dirge of Cerberus came out before Crisis Core. I didn't know that until this week. I thought that it'd come out, you know, earlier. Perhaps, you know, obviously I knew it was 2006, but I thought maybe in Japan it had come out first. So it's quite interesting that, like, actually that game came out first, and we'll get into why that's significant in a bit. But I just think it was interesting that just a frame. That's the way that the compilation is as well as I see it. Are there any things I've missed there? Probably.
Other than expanded materials that have since come with the release of the remake project, which is technically considered part of the compilation, I don't think so.
Yeah, I think there's an extra chapter for Dirge of Cerberus, but I think that falls under the same banner.
I'd say that's Dirge, yeah. Now, my thing for you is, do you know what Crisis Core was originally titled?
I don't know what it was originally titled, but I've been led to believe it was going to be a Before Crisis.
It was! Oh, you fucking know about this. Okay, this is why I'm super salty today, right? Because I knew I was going to get on my high horse about Before Crisis, and I'm so glad you're giving me the space to do this. So, for those who don't know, there was an interview with Hajime Tabata and Tetsuya Nomura. There might have been someone else in this interview. I think this was from 2007, from when Crisis Core first released, but I don't recall who this third person might have been. Anyway, they were asking, where did you get the idea for Crisis Core from? And they responded with, well, it was originally expected to be a PSP port of Before Crisis, because obviously it hadn't come out in the West. But when Nomura was told to make it, they had already decided that Zack was going to be the protagonist, and that it didn't line up with anything that really happened in Before Crisis, because Before Crisis does actually deal with an evil high ensign. It only is covered in 2 chapters. I think it's chapters 12 and 13, and that's it. The rest of it is, well, I say original story. It's an original-ish story, shall we say.
It's the Turks, isn't it? It focuses on the Turks.
That's correct. So yeah, once they realised that it wasn't going to jive, they decided to pivot. So they changed the name from Before Crisis Core to simply Crisis Core, and now we're here, 5 titles deep into the compilation.
I mean, it's interesting because, like, it's very difficult to unpick when the compilation was originally released, because I think there was something they made up as they went along.
Yes, it wasn't ever intended to be a compilation. I think they decided to make Advent Children the film, and then later expanded it into Advent Children Complete, and then it was like, oh, this is making us money. Why don't we do more of this? That's how I interpret it.
Yeah, and I also I'm going to mention the Matrix as I have done in the past. It does seem a little bit like very similar to the Animatrix, if you're familiar with that project. So the Matrix obviously came out in 1999 and completely revolutionized the way that films were made. And then they released something called the Animatrix, I believe a few years later, which had various different anthology animations and various different animation styles, because of course the Matrix was influenced by Akira, if I pronounce it right, and Ghost in the Shell as like frame by frame segments that they used for the Matrix. Now, I think the impression I got from that was the Wachowskis at the time, they were like giving something back to the anime scene and creating a bunch of animated features that are within various different styles to make this anthology. Now, this, in some ways, feels a little bit like that, because it feels to me, if you look at these titles, you've got one came out on mobiles, which were the new thing. One came out on the PSP with the UMD, which was supposed to be the next big thing. One came out on the PS2, which was the current thing. And one came out on the PSP, which was the handheld. So it's like they covered all bases at the same time.
Yeah.
So I don't know how much of that was by design and how much of it was by accident, but it feels very similar in a sense of like, okay, maybe it's not the same thing exactly where we're going to use various different animation styles, but like as an artistic thing. But this feels more like an artistic thing, but at the same time, let's spread out and see which is the most popular as a business decision. But it's always felt to me, I think particularly because UMD was the next big thing and it felt futuristic and it was on PSP and you could watch films on it. It felt to me very similar to that Animatrix style,
Yeah, that's interesting. I'd never considered that before, actually. Like, obviously, I knew the Wachowskis in particular as well. They obviously, with The Matrix, they took so much influence from early Japanese anime, and it completely makes sense that, in turn, Japanese media would then be influenced by The Matrix, so it's just a give and a take constantly, and I hadn't considered it. I think by the time that they had started releasing all these different titles, and this is beyond Final Fantasy VII as well, like, obviously you had stuff coming out on Nintendo DS, and there was, like, mini movies and mini animes and stuff like that, OVAs and stuff like that. My kind of understanding of it was, and I hate to place the blame at Tetsuya Nomura's feet, but because he was, spearheading the Kingdom Hearts project, it was already well known at that point that Kingdom Hearts was just spreading itself across as many consoles as physically possible to make it just
and
so
Disney films,
difficult for people to get have one full experience, that I kind of just viewed it as an extension of that, which is very unfair of me, but yeah.
That's understandable though, and also I can kind of feel that frustration in a way, because of course at the time, we just both said there that you got a DS and a PSP, and that was kind of the point where I had both at the same time. But I'd imagine that people that were a fan of the game or game series not being able to play all of them would have had that similar frustration. I have with various titles myself. I mean, obviously, like when, for example, Sega disappeared off the scene, and then obviously it was I think it was a bit of a flip of a coin, proverbially, which console the Sonic games went to, for example. You know what I mean? Like, I get Sonic Gems collection on GameCube, but I don't get this Sonic Mega collection in the same way. It was the frustration of not owning all of them to be able to collect your games, which is, as a teenager when you can only have access to one console potentially, was something that, I felt with other series, so I can understand it.
To compare it to Kingdom Hearts again as well, I think it's also worth noting that Kingdom Hearts, the development team behind it, has actually gone to great efforts to kind of conglomerate as many things as they possibly can in the final mixes, I believe they're called. So, even if you didn't have the original DS games or the 3DS games or the PSP games or whatever, if you didn't have those, it's okay, because you can still buy them on like PS4 or PS5. It's not going to be exactly the same experience, and I think a lot of those earlier games, they have now changed it so that it's kind of, you're watching more of a film, you're watching the FMVs rather than actually playing the game. They haven't done that with the compilation in the same way. They've come out with Ever Crisis, which has promised to be something very similar, but even then, it's a summation of those early games, and it's also not complete. Even the games that are on it aren't complete. I think the main scenario for Final Fantasy VII, I believe, is complete or nearing completion. Crisis Core certainly isn't. The First Soldier, which is an original title in the compilation, certainly isn't. And before Crisis, Dirge of Cerberus and Advent Children, which have also been promised to be included in this, they haven't even begun to mention whether or not they're going to keep the game alive. So actually being able to reconcile the compilation with how do I experience this is kind of doomed to failure at this point of time, because it's not possible. Even if you're able to go back and play Crisis Core or Dirge of Cerberus and watch Advent Children, Before Crisis is the thing that eludes the West, and I would go so far as to say probably eludes a lot of the Japanese audience now, because it is lost to time. The NTT Docomo phones are not produced anymore. I can't recall the name of the users on Twitter that are behind it, but they are currently undertaking something of a restoration project. I've seen efforts where they've actually gained access to, like, physical Docomo phones. They've gone into the hardware and they've managed to port some of it, but not the full game. And I think the ultimate goal of their restoration project is to have a full working Before Crisis. However, this has been in progress for years and it's not even anywhere near complete. So it's not possible. And for something as big worldwide and loved as Final Fantasy VII, it's kind of mind-boggling to me.
It is a little bit, isn't it? I mean, I'll jump in as well and say that they've also tried at various points to link everything together as well.
Oh, they should stop doing that. They should stop doing that immediately.
It makes an Advent Children Complete, the Blu-ray. There's a reminiscence of Final Fantasy VII Compilation, which kind of goes through some footage of all those games like you've alluded to there and kind of tries to paint a picture. It was very confusing to follow along. It just felt like a bunch of things to put together. Yeah, I agree with you about Before Crisis. It's a bit of a lost media thing. And what's frustrating about it, I think, as well for me, is I remember being a person that was trying to track down all these games. Obviously, we talked about Final Fantasy 3 back in the Final Fantasy 3 episode where I got the emulator and the, because it was the one that was lost to the West. This was very similar, and I remember thinking, I wish I could get that, and of course, oh my god, I can't get it. Even at the time, it was like, well, these phones are now out of date, and I think it became lost media very, very quickly,
Having said that, I am very, very thankful for all the people that have made efforts to preserve the story as much as they can. Even if it's not in its entirety, they were still able to save a copy of the script with their particular player character, Turk. So we know what happens in Before Crisis. If that's all I have to contend myself with until the end of days, then I'm content with that. But also, I've been asking for a port for 18 plus years now. Please, Square Enix, please. Begging.
Go on eBay and track a phone down. Anyway, that's for another day. So that's interesting because one thing about the release of all these games, and the reason I sort of brought it up, was that it's really difficult to pin down when these games were all actually announced, because I think what happened is that Advent Children was announced first, and then technically that organically became the compilation. And what I found though is some game footage and some article footage from the Wayback Machine of press conferences from 2005. So E3 2005's first. We had the Sony press conference where Yuichi Wada was the president of Square Enix. What I love about this is that at the conference, he just walks out and says, thanks, here's Final Fantasy 12. And the Final Fantasy 12 trailer to the E3 had a really, really cheesy voiceover. I don't know if you've ever seen that trailer.
I don't think I have, actually.
Well worth watching. And very notably, and you'll love this, it also notes that the PS3 will be backwards compatible with the PS2. Which, if you remember, the 60GB versions were. So that was something where, of course, at the time, the PS3 was the next thing that was coming. But they were like, well, we're releasing our sexy new Final Fantasy 12. Don't worry, you can play it on the new console. Yeah, right, that happened. So,
oh my god.
But this is where they also show off the infamous Final Fantasy VII tech demo for the PS3.
Right, that was the same year, okay.
Which was that year. So they threw out, the PS3 thing of the opening section, moving away from Aerith, and then showing the train and showing Cloud jump down, put the sword over his head, and that was the end of it. Looks very quaint now, but I remember this coming out and being blown away by it. I also believe this was the event where they announced that the Nintendo one, they announced the DS version of Final Fantasy 3, but that's obviously not part of the Sony press conference. That's just my memory of the time.
Yes.
Now, he also says, we have no plans to remake Final Fantasy 7. And then this big beaming smile comes over his face, because that's clearly what everyone wants. And all over the footage of this isn't a remake, this isn't a remake, this isn't a remake. So it's like that's the point around about the time that Crisis Core was coming, where everyone clearly wanted a remake, because people at the end of the stick, we want a remake. So that's kind of framed it very well. But he did, however, there are plans to bring Final Fantasy to the PS3. Now, that frames it really well, because, of course, that took a while afterwards to happen as well, which we talked about in our Final Fantasy 13 episode. Yep. Now, what I've also found, a Square press conference from 2005, which is, I think, from the same event, it's from E3. There's no video footage of this whatsoever, but there is an article that someone posted at the time, with half of it missing, unfortunately, but it's been lost since the time. Now, what I can see from that is from the same event, 2005, Crisis Core was shown of the trailer, which used clips from Last Order. Mm-hmm. Which is a trailer you can see online. There's no footage of the trailer on a big display. Yeah. It's the video footage of the trailer, which probably exists on a DVD somewhere. I have no idea. Now, apparently, this event highlighted polymorphic content, which probably sounded like what I was talking about there with the Animatrix, let's hit everything. And they then re-announced the Square Online store. I believe, I don't know the history of this, that it was probably took a hit with the Play Online stuff before this. But essentially it was a reinvigoration of media for Square Enix, A More Friends Final Fantasy concert series that happened that day.
I've listened to that album.
I'm not familiar with that. We'll probably talk about that at some point. But apparently that was held at some point, and there's a picture of it in the Paramount building in America. You can see a picture of these stairs, and apparently there was Final Fantasy titles littered the background as the description. So I don't know whether it was actual video. I'm not sure. It's just pictures I can see of some posters and stuff like that. I'd love to go back in time and see that event because there's no video footage of it, but it looks like it was a good event. There's lots of people there. Now, it looks like this was the first time that the term compilation was used to refer to it.
Okay.
But unfortunately, the Wayback Machine hasn't archived that part of the article. There are pictures, however, of a leaflet which has the compilation titles listed in it. Oh my God, I wish I could get hold of that. That would be amazing. That's interesting. I don't know if you knew about any of that stuff.
I didn't, actually. Having said that, though, you mentioning that it's difficult to find out what was announced when completely tracks, because as far as I'm aware, Crisis Core, Last Order, and Before Crisis, they all kind of used very similar marketing things.
Yeah.
I know for Before Crisis, adverts for the actual game used, again, clips from the OVA Last Order. Crisis Core did exactly the same thing. And, it makes sense because all three of these games cover exactly the same moment in time. Why wouldn't you? Last Order also features the extra Turks, even if Crisis Core doesn't necessarily. It completely makes sense. Having said that, it does make our job now, in the modern era, very fucking difficult. So I'm kind of content with just writing it off as these things all came out very, very close to one another. They all use, if not exactly the same pieces of media for advertisement, they're very, very similar pieces, and I'm just going to have to deal with that.
Yeah.
I can't believe how much of Final Fantasy VII is me just going, well, yeah, it's just like that, innit?
I think it was just Square keeping up with the recent trend of bringing in a random cool-looking character with no personality. I mean, they did that in Final Fantasy IX with Amarant as well, so they had to just keep up with this game to dig at Amarant there. Any excuse? Because there are a few Turks that appear in Last Order. We'll get to Last Order in a minute. But I think it's good to frame it as that the compilation it became a thing over time. It seemed to have happened a bit more organically, and it's interesting to sort of talk about this after we've spoken recently about Final Fantasy Versus 13 being made in tandem with Final Fantasy 13. It almost seems like this approach worked with these games that were probably a little bit more low budget, or these titles I should say, because Before Crisis was a game obviously, but Last Order was a movie, with smaller projects that kind of occurring at the same time and potentially borrowing resources from each other worked. Perhaps that inferred what they did with 13 and Versus 13, and they bit off a bit more than they can chew. So honestly,
from a complete layperson's perspective, I think doing it in smaller projects like these is probably the more sensible option.
Yeah, well, that's
whether or not if they did a good job with it is a completely different thing. But smaller titles, you can get them out quicker. That's fine. Big titles, well, you're looking at almost bankruptcy, apparently.
Maybe. So I'm just going to read something over in here, which is about the compilation of Final Fantasy VII. So obviously we've talked about how it was the first proper 3D revisits of Final Fantasy VII in game form since the original title. There were obviously a few times where the characters appeared in various forms. So do you know of a game where the characters from Final Fantasy VII appeared that was in 3D but wasn't a title from Final Fantasy? Do you know of any?
Cloud and Aerith both appeared in Final Fantasy Tactics.
That's correct.
Cloud, Tifa, and Sephiroth appeared in Urgeis.
That's it. Urgeis, however you pronounce it, guys. So obviously they had shown these guys off in 3D in some form, but of course they teased it a little bit. But this was the first time where they really returned in 3D form, is what I'm getting at. Slight tangent. But ever since Final Fantasy VII came out, these characters had been part of the franchise or part of gaming a lot as well. Yeah. Less so than, say, Final Fantasy VIII and Final Fantasy IX, and even to an extent Final Fantasy X, had its own series, but it wasn't as popular or in the other kind of public zeitgeist as, say, Final Fantasy VII characters were. This is the first time you probably get to play as Zack.
Yes.
Because obviously Zack appeared in the Final Fantasy VII, but he was kind of a bit of a legend. You technically get to play as Zack in the flashback to Nibelheim, but it's Cloud's wonky memories. Now, the whole idea of this compilation, from what I can see, was to bring out new scenarios in the past with newer characters that might have been there. So the Turks we talked about before, Zack was an ideal one to expand on without drastically changing events.
Sorry, say that again for me.
Well, that's the idea of Crisis Core, because apparently, or not apparently, certainly, Last Order messed around with events. And apparently, Crisis Core was supposed to not do that. Now, the common event across all of these titles is the Nibelheim flashback. I think every single version, or the Nibelheim incident, I should say, every single version or anything related to Final Fantasy VII in some ways has that, except maybe the snowboarding game, has the shot of Sephiroth, because that wouldn't work at all because the snow would all melt, but has the shot of Sephiroth in the fire turning round.
It's like the image that everyone knows of Seven, yeah.
Even in Smash Brothers, for Christ's sake. So it's kind of the most iconic scene in Final Fantasy VII's lore, if not the whole series, right? So really interesting how Last Order was the first real return to that. There was some backlash about that. And then they were like, oh, don't worry, we'll fix that in Crisis Core. Now, shall we talk about the Nibelheim flashback? I think you've got more notes about Before Crisis than I have, but I have some notes about the Nibelheim flashback to talk about.
Before we go on to that, do you know what kind of backlash there was about Last Order? Because I don't remember any of that.
Only from what I've read. So essentially, just to frame what Last Order is, just to give it a bit of context. So it's an anime, 20-minute anime special episode going through the Nibelheim flashback from Zack's perspective. So obviously, just to frame it, the Nibelheim incident was Cloud and Zack and Tifa were all in Nibelheim, which is Cloud and Tifa's hometown. Sephiroth goes mad, blows it up, burns it down.
It's what happens when you get too many emails.
The top level gist of the top gist of the Nibelheim incident. Mm-hmm. So obviously, this was a story of that, an anime showing it off. There's no official dub. And for some reason, it doesn't appear on the Advent Children Complete Blu-ray, which is a bit upsetting, even though everything else does. Produced by Madhouse, so the art style's fabulous. Excellent action animation.
See, I really like the action animation of Last Order, but I didn't think very highly of the rest of the animation. Looks fine, it's perfectly serviceable, but I know what Madhouse can do.
Yeah, I know, they could do better, yeah.
Like, other things that they've done, they were responsible for the Death Note anime, they were responsible for Black Lagoon, for Cardcaptor Sakura, for every Satoshi Kon work. Like, they can do better. It was kind of a disappointment to watch it again, because I've watched it previously a few times, and again, it's perfectly serviceable. The action sequences they're good, but it's not what I would call stellar animation.
Yeah, but the backlash apparently was, and this is anecdotal, people were unhappy with the changes to the Nibelheim event, and that's why they redid it in Crisis Core to be more accurate to what was in Final Fantasy VII.
I hope those people are happy with themselves.
Now, essentially, just to frame Last Order, because, I mean, we're not going to go too much into detail about Last Order as a concept. We've kind of talked about what it is there. Yeah. It's quite boring, to be honest, to watch it, if you watch it. Pretty much it starts when Nibelheim's burning. I think you may see something from the Turks' perspective first. And it ends with Zack and Cloud on the back of the wagon that they are in Final Fantasy VII, with a sniper aiming at Cloud and Zack jumping in front of him. And that's the end of the thing. So it kind of it's like a midquel for Crisis Core in a sense, or what you want to call it. They call it midquels. Now, the Nibelheim incident in Last Order, comparing it to I don't know how you want to do this. You want to talk about the original Nibelheim incident? I've got original Last Order Crisis Core and what they all have. Do you want to talk about the original first?
Go with whatever feels natural. Man, this is going to be a mess, I can tell.
So the original Nibelheim incident, Zack, Cloud, and Sephiroth and Tifa climb Mount Nibel. Sephiroth goes mad, burns the town. Tifa attacks Sephiroth and gets knocked down. Zack attacks Sephiroth, and then Cloud impales Sephiroth from behind, and then gets stabbed and knocks Sephiroth into the life stream. Obviously, the memory confusion impacts who knows what. In Last Order, the scene's slightly longer with different characters meeting at different times, and it tells the story after the fire. There's no build-up to Sephiroth, going mad or anything like that. Tifa talks to Zack and Cloud in the reactor, which messes up the whole thing of Tifa not remembering Cloud was there, because that's the whole point of the story, is that Cloud didn't know whether he was actually there because he didn't know whether he was Zack or not. And Tifa was like, Cloud wasn't there, so that happening completely fucks it up because she would have known he was there. So that's awful, right? And then Zack has a longer drawn-out fight with Sephiroth, and there's obviously creative liberties with how many strikes there have been and everything like that. And then Sephiroth willingly jumps into the live stream and leaves the Masamune behind. Now, frustrating changes there are the fact that Tifa talks to Cloud there. I'm not too bothered about the changes to the fight because it's an animation. Mm-hmm. You can take creative liberties with how long things go on for, because that's the nature of how these things work. But it's very different that Sephiroth deliberately jumps into the live stream and leaves his sword behind. It kind of completely destroys the continuity, which I assume is what everyone was upset about.
Now, I do have an explanation for you, if you would like it. You may or may not already know this. And this probably came about after the fact. I don't actually know when this particular statement was made. This is something that I've known about for many, many years, so please don't ask for a source on this one. Because the Nibelheim incident is kind of the centre, it's the crux of all of the drama of Final Fantasy VII, right? It it instigates everything that happens within the plot of whichever game.
You had a bad day. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
The reason things are so different in Last Order, they're different in Before Crisis, they're different in Crisis Core, is because they're all being told from a different point of view. Last Order and Before Crisis are the Turks' point of view. They weren't directly witnessing what happened, so I believe it's written that they assumed Sephiroth jumped into the Mako reactor, that he died there. They don't actually know what happened. I think it's kind of a cop-out as a narrative explanation.
Yeah.
But having said that, I do like the concept of looking at the same incident, which is so vital to the story, from many different perspectives, because everyone is going to have a different perspective on it. And we see that. We see Zack have a completely different reaction to Sephiroth. We see Cloud having a different reaction to Sephiroth. We see the Turks having a completely detached reaction to Sephiroth. Like, everyone experiences the world differently, and I like the concept of the way that's shown, just not necessarily the execution.
I agree. Now, I made that as a note. I didn't know that specifically as an anecdote. I said it could feasibly be that there are different opinions of the event. And obviously, that happens in fiction quite a lot. And of course, the whole premise of the Nibelheim incident is that Cloud gets it wrong in his head. So I do quite like that. It's kind of like, like if you've ever watched a crime drama or done a jury service or something like that, you build up the story from different people's perspectives and you see who's lying or who doesn't know they're lying because they remember things differently. It is quite natural. And actually, you know what? I could buy that. I think, like you say, it is a little bit of a cop-out. It works with Last Order and the original. But where it doesn't work...
Here we go.
Now, I don't know if you wanted to talk about Before Crisis and the Nibelheim flashback, but I think you've just done it there.
Before Crisis and Last Order, as far as I'm aware, they actually share the same scenario.
Right,
so
that's cool.
Last Order adapted it from Before Crisis. I think what I've actually got written here is that the two versions were mixed together and a compromise was made, and that's what went into Crisis Core. So they tweaked what was given to us there.
Now, in Crisis Core... we get the whole Nibelheim incident from Zack's perspective, right?
Notably of not someone who really pays attention to things, is he?
So basically, the whole story happens from them going up the mountain. So Zack and Sephiroth and an unnamed guy with a helmet on, who is obviously Cloud, as we know now. Spoiler alert for anyone that hasn't played this, and why would you be listening to this if you didn't know this? It turns up as well. And of course, they get Tifa to take them up the mountain. That's all in Crisis Core. Not got a problem with that part. I think that part's really, really good. But there's a certain character who also turns up. And I've written it here. So fucking Genesis turns up and pushes Sephiroth to madness. Now, the problem with that is that essentially the original story is that Sephiroth goes into the reactor, sees all the Genova clones and all the weird shit going on, and then goes, oh my god, am I one of these monsters? Yeah. Goes down to a library for apparently 3 days or 7 days, depending on what one. People get really upset whether it's 3 days or 7 days. That part doesn't bother me. I don't really give a shit. Who cares? He's there for a while, reading some books. Goes down and then goes mad because he thinks he's a monster or he thinks he's the chosen one, and he goes bananas, burns the town down because he's a god or whatever. It goes on in his head. Okay, but in this game, it's because Genesis has goaded him.
Yeah.
You're not real, na 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 na. And it's just like, oh god, that's so childish. That's just like just ruins the whole thing to me. I mean, we can get into Genesis in a bit. He basically turns around and says, you and Angeal, who is another character in Crisis Core, are the monsters. And Sephiroth goes, oh, okay, I'm just going to go down and go mad. Also worth noting that Cloud emails Zack on his phone, oh, by the way, Sephiroth's burned the town down, come quick. Which is
LOL.
Just, that's ridiculous. Oh yeah, I'm sure that's what you'd be doing at the time, Cloud, good one. And then Zack helps Tifa, and she's like, fuck you, Sonic the Hedgehog. And that's pretty much a different thing, because Tifa hates fucking Soldier for things, which is just like, well, okay. And then there's an extended duel with Sephiroth and Zack. Again, that doesn't matter because it's artistic license, because it's a film or it's a cutscene. And there's a little bit less talking than there was in the original. So, yeah, most of that, like I say, could be put down to different perspectives, but bringing Genesis into it, oh my god, just ruins the whole fucking thing.
It really is unforgivable. Like,
it is.
We'll get on a Genesis run and then a character run. I think those have to be two different things shortly, because this is just going to lead right into it. But honestly, the Nibelheim incident being as big as it is and as important as it is just cheapened by the addition of another character who hitherto is not named, is not known about. He's just introduced, and I'm not necessarily against the addition of new characters into a franchise. Like, I kind of have to be to accept Final Fantasy VII for what it is. Like, fine, I can separate the original game out from everything else, but, like, fine, okay, Cisne exists, the Before Crisis Turks, I just have to be cool with it. That's fine. Genesis takes it a step too far, in my opinion.
It does.
His inclusion in some of these scenes is fine. I don't necessarily enjoy the Angeal and Genesis addition to Crisis Core, and I'll talk about that shortly, but on their own, in their own isolated ways, they're not too bad, actually. Bringing him into such a pivotal instant and then making him responsible for everything cheapens Sephiroth's character, cheapens the rest of Final Fantasy VII, and just completely ruins the vibe, actually. Like, well, everyone has a wing at this point. I get it. One-Winged Angel's a really good track. But it's overplayed at this point. I remember...
Everyone has a wing.
Everyone gets a fucking wing. Genesis has one, Angela has one, Sephiroth has one, and it's just overused. At this point, I remember being like, oh, Advent Children had that really fucking cool rock mix for when Sephiroth appears, right? Fucking awesome. Love it. I want more of that. And then I got more of that with the One-Winged Angel fight in the Mako Reactor, and it was like, oh... I didn't know what I wanted, actually. I was wrong.
Too much chocolate cake's bad for you.
It is.
Because you don't like chocolate cake anymore. Yeah, no, I totally agree.
Having said all that, the scene goes from, like, I can't fucking believe this is happening, this is awful, to absolute peak hilarity, because Genesis, in the preceding scenes, is like, oh, your mum was a monster, you're the one who's responsible for all this, blah, 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 blah. Hey, by the way, I'm dying, can you help me? Bro, pick a fucking struggle.
But I think it's probably the good time to talk about a bit more of the frame, because obviously now we've gone into Crisis Core and its story through that way.
I'm in a Crisis Core right now.
It's probably a little bit of a good idea to frame exactly what Crisis Core does with the story, just to make a little bit more sense of it.
Because there is quite a lot more of it than just the Nibelheim incident. It's a very small part of it.
We'll come back to Genesis in a bit, believe me. So what I've got here, without going into severe detail, I think we should probably talk about the story, what our opinions are, and then we'll probably have an entire Genesis rant section at the end. The idea of Crisis Core, the story, is it's starting with Zack becoming a first-class soldier. It's his first missions as a second-class soldier. It's when he meets Aerith. It's where he moves through to the Nibelheim incident, and the whole story ends with Zack and Cloud escaping the Shinra mansion, and Zack basically dying to save Cloud, and essentially handing, I think he uses the phrase, "You're my living legacy," right?
That's it.
Now that kind of Zack's coming-of-age story, through viewing his mentor, which includes a character called Angeal, who's his actual mentor, Sephiroth, who's the legendary soldier, and this fucking guy Genesis, which didn't need to be in the fucking game, which makes no sense, who's also, similar. It's like a proto-Sephiroth. It's kind of like Sephiroth's evil twin with red hair and a red coat. So, it kind of has that Devil May Cry thing going on, right? We'll get to Genesis in a minute. Just calm the Genesis stuff down. Stupid name as well for a character. He's like, not a problem with it being called Genesis. That's really cool. But stupid name for a character with a surname. What's that?
Genesis Rhapsodus.
If he was just called Genesis, fine, but Genesis Rhapsodus, who the fuck? I understand why that kid's fucked up, because he probably got bullied at school for that. Anyway, right.
Take a breath.
So I'm going to say what I like about the story of Crisis Core, because that frames the whole thing, I think, unless I've missed anything. I think it's pretty much just...
those are the general beats of it, yeah. They do go into more detail overall, but yeah, for a loose overview of the story, that's pretty much it. It's Zack's coming of age.
So I like the interaction between Zack and Cisne. So Cisne is the younger Turk that wasn't in the original game, and Zack's obviously in Soldier, so there's kind of like we're both trainees or we're both young kind of thing going on there. And it's nice to see what I see as a platonic relationship between a male and female character. That's kind of what I got from playing the game. There may have been an underlying love triangle thing potentially. I don't know if you've got anything from that, probably on fan forums and stuff like that. But to me, it felt very much like they were friends and they had a similar background. I liked that a lot.
Honestly, I like Cisne as an introductory character. Obviously, she's young, but she's secure in her role. She's a Turk. They're kind of the best of the best. I think at one point it's noted that she's the youngest of all the Turks that have ever become them. So, she's very much at the top of her game. And then here's Zack, who's trying to become the top of his game. Like you, I see it as a platonic thing. I have seen people arguing that they have more chemistry than Zack and Aerith. Whatever, people are entitled to their opinions. I know.
Sacrilege!
But ultimately, they have a professional relationship, which doesn't necessarily develop because it's introduced as we are working together, and it ends as we worked together. That's it. And that's fine. I really appreciate that, actually.
It's cool. It's really good.
Yeah.
So Angeal being Zack's mentor is a cool concept. And he has the Buster Sword from his mum. So Angeal's mum, Gillian, I believe, has the Buster Sword. And I kind of like the mentor is lost vibe, because Angeal starts off as being a mentor and then disappears in chapter 2 or something like that. And essentially it frames this sort of story where Zack has to choose between Soldier, his mentor, and himself. It's this kind of Tale as Old as Time story where do I trust my mentor, do I trust myself, or do I trust the order we're both part of? It's very Star Wars, like a lot of Final Fantasy is. Now I really like that as a concept. So yeah, I don't know what you think of Angeal. You mentioned you don't particularly like Angeal, or...
I think cardboard that has been soaking in water for half a day is more interesting than Angeal. I understand the concept behind him, and overall, I actually have no issues with the idea of a mentor for Zack. Like, it completely makes sense. This is a military environment. The younger generation is going to need the mentorship to become the next generation, the first classes. That's fine. But by God, Angeal is the most fucking boring character in all of Final Fantasy. It's not even that I can't stand him. I don't care about him, and that's worse.
I kind of agree with you. Because I like the concept and they had to have him in the story because it's Zack's coming of age story, right? Okay. Yeah. Now, I think it makes sense to just talk a bit more about Sephiroth first.
Sure.
Now, Sephiroth, I think, is handled fucking fantastically in this game.
Agree.
And the reason that I think that is because he's essentially a good guy in the game.
He's humanized to a ridiculous degree.
He does everything right. You actually get to see the legendary soldier in action. There's no, like, ambiguity around was he always evil or was he really bad? And I love how the fact that you then, when he gets to the Nibelheim incident, that he does go mad and you see the before and after of Sephiroth and why people revere Sephiroth so much because he's so fucking good. I think that is probably the peak of the game for me. Mm-hmm. That's probably a creative decision, and that probably explains why we get Angeal and Genesis, because if you think about it, if Sephiroth had been Jack's mentor...
It wouldn't have worked that way.
It wouldn't have worked because he would have just followed what Sephiroth did, and then it would have been this flip at the end, and then he had to go off and react to what his mentor had done. That might have been an interesting story, but it wouldn't have felt an entire game. That would have been like a little side story.
See, I think part of the reason why they're able to so successfully humanize Sephiroth is because he has other people in that similar environment to compare him to. And
exactly.
We are told that they became friends. I buy Angeal, Genesis, and Sephiroth being friends the same way that I buy the boys of Final Fantasy 15 being friends. I'm told to accept it. I can understand it, and I'll roll with it, but, like, it's not believable to me.
Oh my God, they're actually very similar, aren't they? Oh, that's fucking horrendous.
Sorry.
Bring Zack in. Oh my God, like Zack, Sephiroth, Genesis, and Angeal are just a fucking proto fucking Final Fantasy 15 characters, aren't they?
I'm so sorry.
Oh my God, they are, aren't they?
Sorry.
Jesus Christ. I can't believe I haven't noticed that before. That's fucked. Anyway, carry on. At least they're not in that fucking car together. Jesus Christ, can you imagine that? Fucking hell.
But yeah, I think it was very necessary for Sephiroth. I think the archetypes of Angeal and of Genesis are actually the necessary archetypes to humanize Sephiroth as well. You needed someone who was very rigid. You needed someone who was very much...
like cardboard.
Yeah, very much a stickler for the rules. That's Angeal. And then you needed someone to contrast that. You needed someone who had more panache, who had more flair. You didn't need any of the fucking Loveless quotes, but, like, they gave it to us anyway.
We'll get there.
You kind of needed both of those for Sephiroth to bounce off of. Unfortunately, by the time the game starts, that three-way friendship is already broken. Genesis was already deserted by the time that you are given control. Angeal deserts within the first 2 hours of gameplay. And from then on, it's just Sephiroth on occasion and mostly Zack. And that kind of ruins it for me. If I'd been given leeway to meet these characters more and to learn about them more, I might have enjoyed them more.
Right.
But I wasn't, so I don't.
Now, the thing that fucks me with it is that it feels like they were trying to create one character to offset against Sephiroth. Like, you know, if you think about it, if you look at Angeal's design, right, you've got similar long hair. It's dark, though, so it kind of feels like the contrast between Squall and Sifa in Final Fantasy VIII, where they both have, one's a small, I mean, Sephiroth's not a small guy, but he's not a bulky unit like Angeal is. It felt to me like they were going to be the counterpoints, and then they had to bring Genesis into it for various reasons, and he was just like a tag-on that didn't need to be there. It felt a little bit like, I don't know if you've ever watched Spider-Man 3, where they had like the Sandman and Venom in there, and it was like too many bad guys just to like sell toys, you know? Too many villains. Now, what confused me with this when I played this, and I generally don't know, I mean, I played it, I think a couple of years ago, like you get Genesis clones and you get Angeal clones, but then you get this whole confusion with the fact that Genesis comes from Angeal's fucking mum. And it's like, so they are like the same person. It makes no fucking, it's like, who's who? Like, I don't really understand. They could have just had one.
Can I be really honest with you, Jack?
Yeah.
I don't know because I don't care.
But that's my point as well. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It doesn't, like, I haven't even bothered to investigate and try and work it out.
Ultimately, Crisis Core feels very much as a standalone on its own in, sure, all of this stuff matters in this universe, but the second that you look away from it and look at something else, you look at Advent Children, you look at Dirge of Cerberus, none of this matters. Angeal clones, Genesis clones, doesn't matter.
And that's, I think, why Genesis doesn't fucking work as well. Now we can talk about the crux of Genesis, because I think the reason that I'm okay with Angeal, and I'm not offended by Angeal, is that he feasibly could fit, and I think this is what you were alluding to before, Cissnei could fit in. I mean, obviously they brought Cissnei into Rebirth. We'll get to that when we eventually get to Rebirth, and they've kind of normalised her in the story, and from what I understand, that works really, really well. Now, and feasibly, even if you take that Rebirth side of it out of it, you'll know better than me because you know the Final Fantasy VII lore a bit better. There's no reason for Cissnei to then reappear because she had the dynamic with Zack. Why would she then come in and follow Cloud? She wouldn't necessarily. You can understand why she wouldn't. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or maybe she would, like, whatever. It makes sense. Angeal not being referenced makes sense because the only person that really had memories of him that was important to the story was Zack.
And he's dead, so...
Genesis being in this, why the fuck did this guy not come back? The whole point is that the whole game of Final Fantasy VII is they're fucking well searching for Sephiroth. You know, I think at some point they'd go, hang on a minute, maybe it's that Genesis fucker that we've left. Like, he would feature in the story. I mean, obviously it's all retconned, but they didn't do that well with Genesis. It's not feasible that he should be in the story.
No.
It just makes no fucking sense whatsoever. Why the fuck was he in the game? I think we know why he was in the game, don't we, from what I understand. So I'm going to start on my rant first because you've had a little bit
Go
first.
for it.
So I'm going to go... so the idea is Genesis is kind of another version of Sephiroth, himself a fused with Genova cells or G cells or S cells or B cells or whatever the fuck they are.
T cells.
And
He's got the T virus.
he's got the T virus. And I think what they were doing was showing an alternative version of Sephiroth, as I've alluded to.
If he was a theatre nerd.
To keep in continuity, they couldn't make Sephiroth like that because you had to see Sephiroth as good. That was fundamental to the story. Yeah, and I've written here, but why, oh God, why didn't they just have it just Angeal? And I've written, it doesn't make sense who's who. Yeah, there's no fucking way this guy wouldn't have been mentioned in Final Fantasy VII. Genesis is stupid as fuck. Now, it reminds me of a pantomime I saw as a kid, where there was a random villain added in. I think it was the Aladdin pantomime where Abanaz is the villain, and then there was a random other villain in it that had nothing to do with the story, and I think it was there to keep the boss of the place that was doing the pantomime happy, like it was the boss's wife, and then she had a role added for her, and that kind of feels what this is. It feels like, let's make a role for Gact, who did the voice for fucking Genesis in 3 seconds in Dirge of Cerberus. That's what it feels like to me. Like, we've got to give him a role because he's in our game. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if you know anything about the history around that.
I don't, actually. So I know that and this is something that we'll talk about probably more when we eventually get around to talking about Dirge of Cerberus.
We've put it off too
to
long.
my horror. But I know that the post-credit scene of Dirge of Cerberus has Genesis.
Yeah,
he was unnamed at the time, I believe. But he has him pick up the body of, it's Weiss or Nero? I can't remember which one it is.
Oh, fucking hell. I think it's Weiss, yeah.
And then jets off to the stars or something with him. And it was all very much like, what the fuck is that? That's about as far as I know.
And I believe Gact has the song at the end of Dirge of Cerberus.
Oh, Redemption! That's a good fucking song, actually.
Yeah,
I like that song.
It's a great song. It's probably the best part of the fucking game. But like, it looks like he was in the game, and then they went, "Oh, can I be in it?" And then they would use his likeness. It fucking is him. It's not.
Yes.
It's not like it's like it's.
And you know
fucking
what?
Gact.
I actually kind of respect them for that. Like, a dude was like, "Hey, put me in Final Fantasy," and they were like, "Yeah, fuck it, okay."
Put me in the post-credit scene, and they went, "Oh, we like you so much. Let's bring you into the entire game of Crisis Core."
And to be fair, if anyone's going to pull off red leather, it's going to be Gact.
Written it here. That happened. It felt like, okay, we've got to create a character for you now. What the fuck do we do? Why they didn't just bin off Angeal and just make Genesis the character, I don't fucking know. I don't know whether maybe Gact had more creative control, whether they just went, okay, Gact, do what you want. I'm not going to point the finger at anyone as an individual, but it does feel a little bit like someone had the wrong creative control at some point and they just had to let someone do it, or someone perceived it the wrong way. Don't fucking know. Either way, it does not work in fucking Crisis Core to me. He doesn't need to be in the sodding game. Now, Loveless. Now, basically, for those not in the know, and I get out while you can, all the way through the fucking game, Genesis is sat there reading fucking Loveless, the poem. Now, Loveless, as I understand it, is a fucking poem play in the Final Fantasy VII universe. Apparently, they expand upon it quite a lot in the remake project, and it appears at various points. There's lots of posters all over the other games of Loveless. Do you know where Loveless comes from?
I do, actually. It comes from the 1991 album by My Bloody Valentine, which is an Irish shoegaze band.
Yes, and My Bloody Valentine, that album, Loveless, was their last album for some time.
Was it?
Now, I'm not the biggest My Bloody Valentine fan in the world. I'm not saying I don't like them, I just never really listened to them. But my God, is that album influential.
I've heard it's very, very good. You know what? I haven't actually listened to it.
Like the Velvet Underground's a really, really influential album, or Sgt. Pepper's or something like that's massively influential. It's one of those going, oh, that's a really influential. Now, apparently, the anecdote I could see was that the guys that developed Final Fantasy VII just really liked that album and just put the poster in, and it actually says My Bloody Valentine at certain points in the game. Now, clearly they've gone, oh, we've got this actual thing in the game. Let's expand upon that and then make it his entire personality that he likes this fucking poem.
I was about to say that was their first mistake. No, that was one of their many, many mistakes at this point.
It's just like he keeps referring to lines from the sodding poem. It's just so edgelordy, isn't it? It's like, I've read this poem, and what's really stupid about it, right? This guy's got this book, and he's like, hey guys, we're these people, this is us. We're like basically it's a story about three characters that are, archetypes. And he's like, oh, Sephiroth, you're him, you can be him. I can be, it's like a child at school. It's like, oh, I can be Darth Vader, I have a red lightsaber. It's just like, for fuck's sake, like, it's such a childish concept. And I'm like, this can't be real. This can't be the main part of the game. I think Sephiroth should just stabbed him on the Junon fucking tower, just killed him, get rid of him, go, don't be in this game anymore, stab, gone, bye-bye, flipping Genesis, and take your book with you, throw it in the fucking harbour, done.
See, the thing is that in a different scenario, maybe a slightly tweaked character, I could dig it. That's the worst fucking part. I can see it really working for someone who grew up with expectations put upon him, not necessarily the best anymore after being the best, potentially, and suddenly he only has this one thing to fall back on, and it's informed his entire life, and now he can see himself fitting in the role, and his two best friends, they also fit into these roles. Yeah, I could see that. I could dig it. Unfortunately, Genesis's redeeming qualities are either 0 or very, very close to 0. He doesn't have character development so much as just a character, which lessens it. If there was a point to Loveless, if it wasn't just convoluted and wasn't just made up of we liked this poster, so we're going to expand upon it, it might have more to it, but it doesn't. So it's annoying.
He's just a sentient band poster, isn't he? That's all he is. That's literally all he is. He's a poster that came to life. Someone cast a spell on a fucking My Bloody Valentine poster and then went, okay, put it into Gak's body, and that's Genesis for you,
It's ridiculous.
It is ridiculous.
I've also got written here, and these were thoughts that I noted down when I was playing through Crisis Core Reunion a couple of years back. So obviously I'd played the original on PSP at this point. This is just a rehash for me to experience the game again because they didn't change anything for Reunion, and I wanted to see how my thoughts had changed in the years since I'd originally played it. And my notes here about Genesis and Loveless in particular is I don't care about this, and the plot needs to slow down. Genesis doesn't show up until you're about 2 hours into it, if you're not doing any of the side missions. And when he comes in, he speaks some words from a book and then flies away.
Yes.
I need more than that to go on to give a shit about any of this, and I feel sorry for the first time players who are expecting more from this, especially if they were coming fresh off the heels of a remake and not having had played it in the past. And I stand by that. I don't think Genesis and Loveless is a good introduction to the character now, with everything else that has happened in Seven's history and the compilation, and people being more and more not inured to it, but like they know everything a bit better. Genesis fucks it all out the window.
It does. And the thing is as well, I mean, like, if you think about it really, so like you probably dig the idea of someone being a bit of a, I can see myself in the story kind of thing. If you look at, say, maybe even look at Final Fantasy Tactics with like Ramza being this hero, and then the history writing down Ramza as not being who he was, and the whole stick we talked about there about history not being necessarily the story that's portrayed. Obviously, we got a little bit of that in here with the people remembering an event differently. You could do that if that story was important in the world. It's just a fucking play.
Yeah,
like he just thinks it's important. Now, if there'd been some kind of like, I guess, I don't know how they would have fucking done this, but like someone like, we all got taught Loveless at school, like it was our flipping Macbeth or our Animal Farm or Mice and Men or something like that, where like everyone in fucking Midgar learnt about this thing, but it doesn't really get sold that way.
Yeah, and the problem with that is that they would have need to have thought ahead and done that in Final Fantasy VII. That whole idea predicates on it needed to be present in Final Fantasy VII, the original, to be that important.
Now, where it does work in Final Fantasy VIII is where you've got it's a bit more subtle, but it's there, where you've got Seifer watching the movie of Laguna and copying his sword stance. That's the kind of thing that it feels like they're going for, but that's told in the Final Fantasy VIII story, and it is like you've got to unpick it to find it, but that makes sense when you get to that point in the game and look at that story beat of actually like, okay, it probably is the film Laguna's in. That I could go with, that makes sense. And of course, Seifer's whole deal is he wants to be the sorceress's knight. Clearly the sorceresses are characters that have been revered in the story with all the way that story is set up. In this one, it's like Loveless is just a fucking like poster.
Yeah.
So it feels very much like Genesis is the only person that gives a fuck.
Oh, absolutely.
No one, he's off on his book again. Oh, fucking like it's like, here he is to come and quote from his fucking book. What a nerd. As opposed to like, well, this might actually mean something because you're interpreting something like the Bible or a book or something like that, where this has weight because it was used by someone in the past to do this bad stuff and this good stuff. That's when a story becomes important and impactful, not if some guy's written a fucking poster in a book and some dweeb's just reading from it. Like, it's like, no, sorry, don't buy it. Now, I've written here, and this is where I've made a really funny observation. Will Genesis be back? And I've written, let's hope not. It's my understanding that Genesis can't be in the compilation because they need the likeness of Gax to have him in it. Mm-hmm. Is that what your understanding is?
That was my understanding. Whether or not that is still true, I don't know. There's a interview with, I believe it was Famitsu, I could be wrong on that one, from about the time that Reunion was set to release, and the interviewer says, there were rumours for the longest time that we never saw a remaster or a port of Crisis Core because of the licensing deal with GACT. Was there any substance behind this rumour, or was it more of just a timing thing? And Nomura's response is, the rumours aren't true, there was nothing to do with GACT or a contract that was preventing a remastered version of Crisis Core. As you said, this was more due to timing. There were talks of making Crisis Core as a remaster earlier, but we were in the middle of developing the remake project. If you play it, there were quite a lot of things added from the original Final Fantasy VII, so we felt it was appropriate to wait until the end of Remake before working on Crisis Core Reunion. So, no, there is no issue like that.
No issue like that with re-releasing Crisis Core, but potentially if they were to bring GACT Genesis into the remake series, maybe they would moving forward, is what a potential theory, maybe.
Potentially, but you know, we'll never know that one.
If that's the case, then I have a solution. Well, basically, if they can't get GACT's likeness, then they just get Ben Starr's likeness and call him Benesis.
I'm leaving this silence in the edit. I hope you find salvation for the sins that you've committed today. I hope the gift of the goddess blesses you, Jack. You motherfucker.
Oh god, I've been looking forward to saying that for like 24 hours. It's amazing.
Hey. And on that terrible bombshell, I think that's probably a great time to take a little break. So if we come back and then we can discuss more about the good parts of Crisis Core, because funnily enough, there are actually good parts to talk about.
Cool, see you in a bit.
See you in a bit.
So, welcome back after that break. We're now going to talk about some good things about this game. So, another 5 minutes. No, there's plenty of good stuff to talk about this game. So, I'll let you start, Mole, on what your story and character beats that you like about the game, because I've kind of got into mine.
Yeah, Crisis Core is one of those difficult ones, because it's so broad in its time scale, and there are quite a lot of things in Crisis Core that I really actively dislike, and I'm not going to talk about any of the Hollander stuff or any more of the Angeal Genesis clone stuff, because I hate that, and I want to focus on stuff that I like now.
Yeah, we've done that. Yeah. It's just boring, and who cares, yeah. So,
things that I like. I really enjoy being able to watch Zack's growth. Now, it's a very strange thing to say, because Zack doesn't actually have a whole lot of growth in this game. However, for people with very big brains and a very open mind and a willingness to actually dig in, I guess, to something that on its surface is kind of shallow, because Zack is a very shallow, very easy to understand character. I'll say it, he's a puppy. He really is. He's a puppy of a character. He gets excitable about things that he enjoys. He just wants to be a hero. That is his number one. He has a little bit of angst when his mentor turns tail. He meets a girl that he likes. He meets a dude that he befriends. Everything's going up Zack until it isn't, and then his character changes, and it's more serious at the very end. But actually watching his character develop like that is really interesting, especially within the whole sphere of Final Fantasy VII. So we're introduced to Zack at Fort Tamlin in Wutai, because the war is still going on. He's still a second class. He's needed on the front lines. Zack is like 16, 17, and he's very high up in the military structure already, to the point where Zack, before the age of 18, is a military hero, and he doesn't have any second thoughts about cutting people down in a war. It's not necessarily that he derives pleasure out of it. He doesn't lose sleep over it. This is just something that he does for his job. And that, I think, is something really, really interesting to be concerned with. Because Zack's whole thing is, I want to be a hero. And, you know, I asked you that at the very beginning. What actually makes a hero?
Yeah.
Is it?
I want to be a murderer.
Yeah, because to him, hero is being a first-class soldier, being like Sephiroth, being someone who's on top of the military, on top of the world, strong, reputable. The Wutaians wouldn't see it that way.
No.
And Zack's actions are not necessarily heroic in a lot of senses. He doesn't think first. He doesn't necessarily do the right thing all the time. He acts on his heart more than his logic, which is a fine thing, I think, for a character and for a person to do. Like, not everyone's logic driven. I'm certainly not. I absolutely dig it. The thing that gets me about Zack is the crux of his character is that he is very, very loyal. He's loyal to Shinra up until they dick him over. And then he's not. And we only see a few hours of this right at the very end, because he really is loyal to Shinra and the people within it, but mostly the people within it. I feel like if you took Zack out of the military industrial complex that, like, Soldier
use the phrase,
he doesn't necessarily believe in what Shinra believes in. I can't think of a single point at which Zack is like, oh, but they're the electric company, they help people, they do this and they do that. He doesn't
doesn't try and justify
them.
No,
he doesn't. He tries to justify Angeal's actions. He doesn't really try to justify Genesis, but, like, who could? Let's be real.
There's no way you're going to do that. No, just a dweeb in the corner with a book,
He sticks up for Sephiroth at every turn. He Zack humanizes Sephiroth in a way that Angeel and Genesis are completely unable to do. He humanizes the Turks, of all fucking people. And these are people who... Cisne says, this isn't my real name. And it's a nice little nod to Before Crisis, where you can input her name if you select her as a player character. So I really liked that. But also, it's like, okay, well, this is a alibi then. This is a persona that you're playing. Zack bulldozes past all of that and considers these people, these absolute scum of the earth people. We know the Turks aren't good. He considers them friends, in as much as you can consider a Turk a friend. He makes friends with Cloud in the most remote situation. They're on the way to dispose of monsters in Medeoheim, when he and Cloud are joking about how they're both backwater boys. Like, that is such a core strength of Zack.
It's difficult not to like Zack, really, isn't it? I know I had jokes in the past about Zack being a dick, but Zack in this game, he kind of takes up that mantle of winning everyone over character. Now, an interesting comparison I can make now with some of the other Final Fantasy protagonists. You just made the military industrial complex phrase there, link with the Shinra and Zack. So the comparison there would be with Squall, where Squall essentially is not necessarily a war hero, but he's definitely prolific.
Yes.
At the round about the same age. Now, where he's different is he's sort of a few times in the story he's like, maybe I could quit, and I think he kind of realizes that, hang on, using the phrase you talked about before of there's no good or bad side, there's two sides holding different views. He's a lot more an intelligent character than Zack. He's a more emotionally attached character. He's less of a puppy. He's more a big thinker. So actually, he kind of, what he does is, instead of like going against Garden or anything like that, is he shapes it the way he thinks it needs to be, which is really, really good. Now, if you then compare Zack to Zidane in Final Fantasy IX, he has that same quality of like winning everyone over and becoming friends with everyone, which is really, really good. I've never noticed that until you've just said that. So that's fucking amazing. Like another little link that we've got with the characters in these games. So I like that. Thanks for that.
No, of course. Like, honestly, I know I've probably said this before. You were probably winding me up deliberately and like, oh, Zack's a dick. No, Zack's actually a really good character. But this is why I really wanted to get into it, because he is a very shallow character with surprising depths that I don't even think he himself would be aware of.
I just think the thing that wound me up about Zack was just to sit still, stop squatting, you fucking idiot.
Bro, it's the ADHD. Honestly, let him have this.
Well, no, I'm not going to diss anyone for that, but why squat? Get a fidget spinner or something, man, like, instead of squatting all the time. And what annoys me about...
I don't want to out myself here, but I'm sure that Zack's ass, it's fucking brilliant.
Well, this is the thing, like, it could very well be the biggest thighs in the world, but you never get to see that because of the PSP's limitations. That's probably the problem. That's probably what it is. Come on, Squaresoft, go back in time and make him thick. Anyway, right.
To go on that then, like, the change in Zack's character where he realizes that Shinra isn't necessarily the force of potential good that it could be, when he's taken in Nibelheim and experimented on. And I think probably Crisis Core's weakest point for me is that we don't actually get a lot more at Nibelheim. You see the whole incident go down, but then I was kind of expecting more of, this is the kind of stuff that happened in the labs. This is why, Zack is ultra incredible. This is why he and Cloud are codependent on each other. And we didn't get any of that. You just have a time skip and then you leave, and that was it. And it was really quite disappointing.
Yeah.
But Zack then turns from a puppy into this single-minded, very serious character, and it's such a stark change, and I can't help but really, really love that about him, actually.
He actually does become a hero, doesn't he, when he stops trying to become a hero?
Well...
He sacrifices himself for his friend. So it's Have you got a problem with that? Have you?
No.
Friend?
Like,
because fuck Cloud, right?
No, so what I was going to say was the ending scene. How did that make you feel?
Very, very sad.
Yeah, I remember absolutely fucking bawling my eyes out.
Like, I mean, I didn't play it until a couple of years ago, but the fact you actually actively play,
yes,
and it's a game, and obviously this is the beauty of games, is you can interact with them. I mean, obviously you essentially are struggling and you cannot win. It's an unwinnable battle. You know how I feel about those.
Oh, yes.
But that is, in a way, narratively done really, really well, because it's like, well, actually, you can't win, but it is harrowing.
I think it's made worse by the fact that there are missions that are unlockable at the end of the game, which pits you against waves and waves and waves of soldiers. I think it starts off as like 10 and then 50 and then 100 and then 300. And it's just endless ways. And it's preparing you for this moment if you do them. Like, oh, I can definitely do this. I've done this before. No, the fuck you can't.
There's no way of winning. Now, what I like about it, and this is kind of the point of the story, is that, and this is something that, I mean, I'm not going to talk about anything specific or anything like that, and I'm certainly not, I've certainly never been to war or anything like that, but like wars are horrible, horrible things, and like you get people that are flung into close proximity with people very quickly and become very close. You have to rely on each other very, very quickly. That's why I think that the realism of Cloud and Zack's friendship can't be understated, because essentially what it seems like Zack does is he has these mentor characters that he's been looking at. He's had Angeal, to a lesser extent he's had Genesis there as a mentor, quote unquote, and Sephiroth certainly. And then eventually, like you say, he realises that Shinra aren't good, and he comes to his own conclusion to make his own decision, which is, again, also very, very Star Wars. You've got Luke Skywalker asking everyone if he's going to become a Jedi, and then realises he has to take his own path to get there.
Yeah.
It's the same kind of thing, right? But what I love about this is that he then has Cloud as his underling, someone that he upholds responsibility before, because this guy is going to be the next him. He's a little bit younger, and he's not a first class, is he? He's not even a recruit yet. And he sees responsibility, and there's almost like this underlying, hang on a minute, these guys I looked up to, all of them let me down.
Yeah.
So the Shinra let me down because it fucked me up. Angeal let me down because he was a traitor. Genesis let me down because he wouldn't get his fucking head out of that book. And Sephiroth let me down because he wouldn't get the head out of his books and went mad and burned the town down. So the only way to be what I really want is to be what I really want and become myself. But in order to stop this happening again, I've got to set an example for this person.
Yeah.
And then Cloud, You're My Living Legacy, really, really brings his character into the whole forefront of Final Fantasy VII in a better way than I think the original Final Fantasy VII did, because in the original Final Fantasy VII, you've got to hunt for Zack. Like, he's referenced a little bit. And the scene where you go into the bit where they do escape and they get in the thing is not something that you have to play in the game. It's something that you have to unearth yourself. And I think the fact that this is overt about that, and that's the end of the game, I think's great. I don't know about you.
That's really interesting, because I'm kind of in two minds as to which version of Zack's end that I like best, because like you said, the interactivity of actually playing Zack's final moments and watching the DMW spin and seeing his last thoughts, which we'll talk about the DMW and the actual gameplay itself in a little while.
Yeah, we will.
That fucking ruined me emotionally. I remember playing.
It's flashback, live flashing before his eyes.
Yeah,
Stuff.
I remember playing through that final battle, and like after a certain time, his movements are sluggish, he can't swing the sword very well, he's on his last legs, and it's an impossible battle, and I just remember being in floods of fucking tears while doing that, before the cutscene had even started, for fuck's sakes.
And what I remember distinctly from that section is actually the phrase went through my head, just let me die.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, oh my fucking god, that is such an excellent piece of gaming design. Whether or not it's something that I would necessarily say is enjoyable or not, that's because I'm thinking, oh my god, I can't win. Just in a game, you do it all the time. You just turn around and go, well, I'm just going to, I can't win. I've got no health. I'm going to just jump off a bridge or whatever in a game. But when you realise the weight of what you're doing in that game, it's like, fuck me, this is so realistic.
Yeah,
and quite harrowing, you know?
As a piece of game design, I think it's fucking top tier. Really, really might be the high point of Crisis Core for me, the very end of it, and that's not to say the rest of it is bad necessarily.
No.
However, I think there is something a little bit too Hollywood in fighting a fucking squadron of Shinra soldiers. There is something okay, right, Zack has been built up as this, he can take Sephiroth in a battle, he could, if you build him the right way, he can take down an actual goddess, he could do anything, and it takes a whole army to bring him down. That's fine. It's a little too unbelievable for me. The original FF7, where you watch him try his best to, I think it's to run away, and there's only 3 other people on screen. There are 2 Shinra grunts with a gun and a sergeant that orders the shot, and that's it. And that is so much more raw to me and so much more believable.
Yeah.
So I'm really torn as to which I prefer.
Well, I think it really depends on the medium you're watching it in. I mean, that original cutscene, that makes sense. And I think that ties in with what we were saying about artistic license for the medium,
Yes.
like where we have the Last Order stuff where, like, oh my God, this fight goes on a lot longer than the 3 or 4 frames it does in the game. It makes sense because you are showcasing a different art form. And actually, you're not necessarily saying this will happen for this long. But, in a game, for example, when you fight, if you wanted to bring out a movie into a game, then, like, a prime example would be in GoldenEye on N64. Like, they just had the film and they went, how can we make this into a game? I don't know, we'll have this dam scene which is like fucking 30 seconds of the movie and we'll make it an entire level.
Yeah.
You have to kind of play a bit of creatively with the way that the art is put across.
That's a good point.
I know what you mean about it being a bit Hollywood. I kind of get that, but I think at the same time, I think that original scene in 7 is so bleak because it is like there's no one else around. But I think the way that you interact in the story in Crisis Core presents it differently, but it comes across the same in a way because it is bleak. I think you see what I mean.
I think I know how that final battle in Crisis Core could be salvaged for me, and honestly, it's a very, very simple change. I think it's because you defeat enemies in Crisis Core and they fade off the screen, and then if there's a new wave, they fade in, and there's stuff in the background happening. So in this final battle, you can see soldiers that are on the cliffs watching this fight go down, and then when you defeat one group, you go, okay, I've done it, they fade out, and the next lot fade in. I don't think that works specifically for this. I feel like if it really was just you against the whole 1,000 or however many there actually are in that battle, and they were all on screen now, I know the PSP would not physically, it would explode before it allowed you to actually render that. But if it was something a little more Kingdom Hearts, I suppose. I'm thinking specifically of that scene in Kingdom Hearts 2 where it's you against like 1,000 Heartless and they are all on screen and it's just relentless. I think that might have worked a bit more. I might not necessarily have preferred it over the original because 7's a bleak game and I think the bleak tone of it works better, but I might have been less like about it.
Well, I think the bleak tone works so well in the original 7 because of the less realistic design.
True.
It's kind of like, the more cutesy, super deformed characters offset that bleakness.
That's a good point. Actually, now that you've said that, I did just have the thought of like the day that Square Enix decides to render someone being like shot point blank in the face and then just die, that's the day that the series has changed for the worse, I think. Unless
it's Genesis, that'd be fine.
Wow.
But he'd block it with his book. There'll be some poetic thing where it goes...
the gift of the goddess!
the bullet goes through the flipping word, and it'll be the exact same word that he meant that was prolific to... And he'll be like, I've proven my point, and I've made my fucking deal. Look at my nice red coat. Now it's covered in blood as well. It's even redder than it was before. Some bullshit like that, probably.
We need to go through F Crisis, whatever, next, so we can get to Genesis Crisis.
Yeah. Fucking crap will be that one, I think. Genesis Crisis.
So I think overall that's probably my favourite aspect of Crisis Core.
Yeah, I like it. I think it was definitely the most interactive, incredible thing that only games can do, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I remember another Square Enix title that was very different in its approach, but similar in its how it made me feel. Was I don't know if you've played Life is Strange. Spoiler alert for Life is Strange. You get to like chapter 3 and you've got to talk a girl out of jumping off a roof.
Right.
And if you don't talk her off jumping off the roof, she jumps off the roof. And it's you can stop her doing it if you speak the right way. And if you interact with her in the chapter and don't ignore her, you can prevent her from doing it. And if she does, you feel like it's your fault, is what I'm saying. And that's something that only the medium of gaming can do because you are part of that. It kind of reminds me of that in this game. Obviously, it's interesting. It's another Square Enix title as well, but essentially it's something you can't have with the book because you're outside the book. And there are certain things you can do with, like, choose your own adventures where you can choose the ending of the story, but that's not necessarily you. You're kind of like the omnipotent being doing that, but you aren't interacting with the characters on a personal level. You aren't that person. It's the same with film. Netflix, they had the old Bandersnatch thing where you could choose the ending of the series, but at the same time, you're not
really
facing an army. You're not talking to characters to stop them doing things. That's where the gaming medium, is unique in its way it tells stories in that sense, I think.
So as far as the rest of the characters then, we've talked about Zack, we've talked about Genesis and Angeal, we've talked about Sephiroth. What about the rest of the cast? Because there still are a couple of other characters. What did you think of them?
A lot of them are a bit... I mean... Lazard is kind of there. I think this might be the first game Lazard's in, because a few of the other ones kind of like turn up. It might have been in before Crisis, I don't know. Lazard's okay. He's just there.
Yeah, he just kind of exists.
A lot of them are like that. I mean, Hollander's a pain in the arse. Don't like Hollander. He's just another tag-on character. And a lot of characters, like Gillian, who's just...
for all of her 5 seconds on screen,
Yeah, like a lot of the characters, other than the ones we've talked about, are just there. Like the Turks are just there. The point is you could swap out Reno and Rude, their scene, for any other Turks. And it's the same with the other Turks that appear. Like, the only one that's of any significance, really, in the story is Cisne.
I'd say Sung as well, to a degree.
Sung to a little bit, because he's more in charge,
Yes.
I guess. To me, it didn't really matter that it was him, per se, if that makes sense. I don't think Rufus appears at any point, does he?
No, there is, however, a fantastic little aside. You get a mail at some point where I think it says, like, oh, the vice president of the Shinra company has gone on extended vacation. That's a nice little nod to Before Crisis, where Rufus is actually put on house arrest.
Oh, wow,
He is sent out of the country and put on fucking house arrest because he's been funding Avalanche.
What I like about the whole Final Fantasy VII world, I mean, there's lots of things I like about the Final Fantasy VII world, and it is particularly overt in the Final Fantasy VII world. It's the shades of grey element of the series. I mean, you obviously get a bit of that in Final Fantasy VIII. You get a lot of it throughout the series, that there's no good or evil. It's just the point of view, and people can be evil depending on what they choose. Final Fantasy IX does that quite well. But Final Fantasy VII does the whole, because there are so many different factions. Like, for example, the Turks, they work alongside Shinra, but they're not the same as Shinra. So they are sometimes at odds with Shinra, but they're not. It's not good and evil, you know what I mean? It's kind of like everyone has their own agenda.
Yeah.
And I think this game kind of really fits in with that very well, because essentially you've got Zack, who works for the Shinra, but also is friends with Cisne, who at the time just seem to be aligned. But even when they're not later, he'd still be friends with her. I really like that angle where the politics of the world don't affect necessarily the people's relationship.
It feels very real. In a very unbelievable manner. That sounds really weird to say, but like, I could see myself talking to these people in like an office environment and being like, oh yeah, they're friends outside of work.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think where, like, for example, Final Fantasy VIII is a bit trickier is that, and even Final Fantasy VII Vanilla is a bit trickier, is because essentially those stories are told where you eventually become the kind of rebel group and you go off. So interacting with any of the sort of peripheral characters would be difficult, and then what ends up happening a lot of the time is they end up being brought into your fold. So Beatrix is a prime example where Beatrix isn't quite aligned with Queen Bran and Alexandria. You convert her to your team. There's a lot of that going on in the other Final Fantasy games. In Final Fantasy VII, kind of uniquely, you get that third faction, which is the Turks, which is kind of in the middle between being the kind of its own organization that does its own thing and being part of the structure of the world. And that's something that I think is done really well here, because you get that kind of link where Zack decides to, I mean, I don't remember the exact story beat and what happens when, but Zack decides to turn against Shinra, but Cisne doesn't then go, I'm going to come with you and be part of your gang. It also doesn't go, I'm going to tell the Turks on you. It kind of, there's a little bit of that going on, but it's not.
See, it's interesting because
I
think Crisis Core is kind of the turning point of the Turks being humanized. Before Crisis kind of did it first, but because we didn't get it in the West, it makes it like infinitely more complicated, and I'm just so pissed off about this, can you tell? But Crisis Core itself, I think, really started the whole, the Turks are as grey as Avalanche, because in the original game, they're fucking scumbags, actually. And
they're horrible.
I forever rue the fact that they decided to clean their image up for Final Fantasy VII Remake. In the original, to me, I always interpreted Song as having kind of a baggy uniform. Reno looks absolutely disgusting. Like, they don't come across as good characters even in the visual design to me. But Crisis Core is where they started to have their own personalities and their own kind of opinions. And you go, oh, they're not just Shinra lapdogs. They are their own people, with all of the pros and cons that comes with that. And then you get to Remake and you see even more that they have misgivings and doubts about situations that they're ordered to do. And I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing to display, because like you said, 7 is very diverse in its characters and its organizations and the way that people deal with certain things. But like, I feel almost like it's a bad thing because of it. There's something just very insidious about the SS of Big Oil being suddenly like, you know, we're not necessarily good guys, but like, haha, we could be. I take it back. Advent Children did it. Advent Children did it. It all comes back to Advent Children.
No. It's in Final Fantasy VII as well. When you meet them in Wutai,
shit, you're right.
Your alliance with them, so it is there. I think that I know what you're saying, because I think it's definitely the game that you have to do in Final Fantasy VII, because I think we said this before. Like, you only have to fight the Turks twice.
Yeah,
but there are about 4 or 5 battles with them where you can fight them. They're kind of in there in the background, and like to find those shades of grey bits, you have to dig for them and look for those parts of the thing. It is very, I think it's in that section where you meet them in Gongaga, that you see their personalities and how they are a bit human. I think it's kind of the thread that the breadcrumbs are in there of them being their own people. But I do agree with you that is overtly it's a bit interpret your own way. Are they their own people, but still they're going to work for the bad guys? Or are they their own people and they're just as grey as Avalanche? Yeah. And you're right, Adventure on the Compilation and the rest makes it more overt and makes that decision for us. Now, where I think that Cisne works really well to counter that either way it's done is that Cisne is her own person. She is the newbie.
Yes.
So even if they decide to go for a whole, they are the SS of Big Oil, she's still not deep enough in it to be influenced by that. So either way, it doesn't. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
So it could be that they're like that, or it could be that they are all shades of grey. In which case, but Cisne,
they've been able to do it successfully to a certain degree with the pre-existing Turks. But I agree, they needed a fresh face to be able to really pull that off. And Cisne filled that role.
If it had been Elena, it would have ruined it.
Oh yeah, big time.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, it's definitely an interesting conversation topic for another day as well, because there's so much we can talk about with the Turks, because they are brilliant characters. Not as good as Fusion and Regime, but we'll get to that another day. So so that's it for me on the characters, I think, because the rest of them are just
a bit more
in the background. Do you really?
Oh yes. Talking about like characters having something of a characterization shift, and we've just done the Turks and their emotional greyness. Now there's one very, very important one that we haven't discussed. How do you feel about Aerith in this game?
Oh fucking hell! I can't believe we haven't done this yet. I think that the subplot, I've talked about this in our couples episode, with Zack and Aerith as a couple is fantastic. I think it's so believable, it's so real, and their relationship just makes sense. In terms of my perception of Aerith, I always just thought of her as being younger in this game because it's longer ago. Mm-hmm. I never really felt anything was jarring for any reason other than that, personally.
Okay, interesting.
I'd imagine you got a different take.
Oh yeah, I wrote a mini essay on this one in my notes.
Did you really? Okay.
So, as far as the Valentine's couple thing, because actually I wrote a note on this as well, I would like to issue a new statement. I know what I said about Zack and Aerith.
You were just trying to fuck me up because it should have been fucking Laguna and Rain, shouldn't it?
I am a being of many multitudes, Zack. I am allowed to change my mind at will.
You just call me Zack, don't call me Zack.
Oh dear, I'm deep in it today.
I'm not squatting for you.
So, my new statement is that I still think overall of all of the couples in the Final Fantasy franchise, they remain at my number one position. That bit isn't changing. But I think what I like is the concept of them more than the reality. It's cute, it's sweet, and I very much like what's presented to me on the surface. But it only works because Aerith's personality has been tweaked to fit a romance more than anything else. She is not the cynical, avoidant person that she is in the original game. Yeah, she's younger, and I completely believe that, like, in the 5, 6, 7, however many years it is between Crisis Core and Original 7, people change. I changed, you changed, we all changed. That's just how life is. But Aerith's change in 7 original game is so drastic. How did we go from soldier are considered heroes of children, protectors of the peace, but they're not normal, to, hey Cloud, why don't you dress up like a girl? It's the only way to save Tifa. There is just such a jump in personality that I can believe, but I have to really push myself to believe it.
You have to introduce a lot of headcanon for it to make sense. No, I can see that. I think it's just one of those things where, like, probably because I didn't finish 7 until much later, and I've got a lot of the memories wrapped up with the remake project, which does feel a lot closer, I think, because of the performances more than anything.
Yeah.
So I can see what you're saying, but I think it's just easier for me to make that headcanon work.
No, that's completely fair, and I really don't begrudge you for it at all. I think my note here says, like, I doubt if they'd actually met up again, it would have worked out for them, precisely because of how they've changed as people. Zack's become more serious, Aerith's become more cynical.
Yeah.
Like, they aren't the children that they were, and the strain of trying to go back to the way that things used to be, I think would have broken them. And you know what? I kind of really love that, actually. That solidifies it as being a good romance to me, because, like, yeah, people change, they move on, and you can't go back to the way things were. Hey, almost like the hero's journey.
I think I've got a soft spot for their romance in this game, because I think in a way, like you just said there, because it could be fleeting. It's so realistic of, like, young, not even romance, young friendships of people that are, you know, I mean, fucking of all the things that's coming into my head is the Fox and the Hound. Have you seen that movie?
No, I haven't, actually.
Well, the Fox and the Hound's a Disney film, and I think it must be based off a story. But basically, the idea is that the Fox and the Hound are friends as kids, and then when the Hound goes off hunting and grows up, there's the pecking order, and they can't be friends anymore. It's a star-crossed friends thing, but they still act as friends, and then realise they can't. It's this kind of class thing, or whatever you want to call it, and an underlying, we can't be friends because of political kind of waypoints and stuff like that. A little bit of Romeo and Juliet kind of stuff. Not that I'm comparing Zack and Aerith to Romeo and Juliet, because I mean, I don't think that he'd be able to. I don't know what the fuck I was going with that. I was going to say let down your hair. That's Thumbelina. What the fuck am I talking about?
It's not even Thumbelina, it's Rapunzel.
No, God. You call me Zach.
Yeah, okay, all right.
It's not in Loveless. There's fucking Genesis has his book open and reading all these fucking fables, and then she let down her hair.
So I will say there is one last point that I want to make about the Aerith thing that I didn't know until like last week when I made these notes. Did you know there's an affection level in the game?
Oh, fuck off.
No, apparently there is. I had no idea about this. I thought it was just one script, whatever. No, depending on certain things that you do, I guess it's...
See her squat as well, right?
Oh, you're a nightmare, you are. I think it's dependent on, like, doing side missions, but I'm not 100% on that because I couldn't find out exactly how. But Aerith's responses to things that are said in the game will change depending on whatever your relationship level or affection level is with her. Just like in the original game, you know, you're fighting for affection between Tifa or Aerith, and who you get on the Gold Saucer date is dependent on it. The responses that you can get kind of range from, you know, people being like, oh, you two are a cute couple, and she'll say things like, oh, it's not like that at all, like just straight out denying it, all the way to, yeah, I've never met anyone like him, he's really special. This is a wide range, and I was genuinely really flabbergasted to find that out.
I didn't know that was there. I know that reminds me of the stuff you can do in Final Fantasy VIII, where you go to the infirmary. And
yes, that's like my favourite scene in 8.
yeah, it's really, really good. Yeah, I do like that kind of thing that you can influence. It brings in the RPG, the old school RPG elements, which obviously are a big part of Final Fantasy VII. You know, you can influence whether the scene under the High Wind happens or not with Tifa and Cloud. I just really like it. I just think it's a really good, not comic relief, but it's a really nice, oh, I've come home after a day at the office kind of vibe. Yeah. You just, I mean, obviously there's bits going on with Aerith and how they're looking for Aerith and stuff like that, but he goes to the slums and he has a nice time with his girlfriend, and it's just a way for him to get away from fucking war.
Yeah, it doesn't need to be any more than
so
that.
Nice.
Yeah.
It's just so fresh and nice and pleasant, and it does remind me of the far superior relationship of Rain and Laguna, which we talked about before, where it was the same sort of fucking thing, done much better in my opinion. But anyway, we've been there, haven't we? But I jest, of course. So obviously we talked a bit about throughout the episode about the reunion or Crisis Core reunion or reunion Crisis Core or RC reunion crisis of whatever the fuck it's called this week. Where do I put it on my shelf, Square? Thanks a lot.
Oh yeah, no, that's the absolute worst. Like my Steam list of Final Fantasy games is like FF4, FF5, FF6, blah 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 blah, and then Lightning Returns is all the way somewhere else. Like, great.
That's an interesting thing because I bought Lightning Returns for Xbox so I can do game capture this week at CEX, and I looked at the Final Fantasy section, it wasn't there, and I went, wait, and then went down to L, and it was just there. So yeah, it's absolutely nuts. So obviously we've talked a bit about it, but let's focus in a bit on some of the changes, because we talked about how there weren't really any changes, but a lot of them were subtle.
Yes.
So from my understanding, there weren't any changes to the core game, but there were a few new lines added in to make, because they were re-recorded all the dialogue. And there were a few bits and bobs added in visually as opposed to changing the actual story.
Yeah, the story itself remained completely untouched. Everything on screen was upscaled. I think I said earlier it's for the UE4 engine. 4. But otherwise, the story itself and the sets, immaculate. Yeah,
so what I will say is, and I'm just going to caveat this by saying that I don't want to have a pop at the developers or anything like that, because I think this is a fantastic product, this upscale or whatever, but it looks pretty, but it's still so obviously a PSP game.
Yes.
Like the design, it is still quite clunky feeling.
Not just the design, the loading screens really got me.
Right, yeah.
Oh my god, like we are using better hardware than 2005 era handhelds. We don't need to load every single fucking screen when we walk through a door. We can do better than this.
Type 0 is very similar as well. We'll talk about that eventually, maybe in 2029, hopefully. So yeah, not taking anything away from the effort. It's a fantastic product, and to be honest with you, like it's probably the best they can do without changing the design. Now, one thing I will say is the big change really is the voice cast for the dub. Now, I'm going to go out on a limb here. I do have some points about the dub. From what I can see and what I found, the little research I've done, the original sub or the Japanese version had all the same actors that came back for a reunion.
That is correct.
My understanding was that some of the characters they didn't re-record any dialogue. I think Gak, they had all his dialogue, and some of them redid some lines, but it is the same cast that's been in place. Now, every character in the dub was changed to be more in line with the remake cast, apart from one.
Ooh.
Now, do you know who that is?
Ooh, that's interesting. I don't think I do.
Someone called Shelley Sweeney. Do you know who Shelley Sweeney plays? you're not going to get.
Fuck. You're going to say it's like Scarlet or something, aren't you?
I reckon that Shelley Sweeney has the most dialogue in the game, actually. I'm going to have to tell you.
You are. I'm lost.
Activating combat mode.
So what's interesting, I cannot for the life of me, unless I do the crazy thing I normally do, I didn't have time to prep for this podcast and import the Japanese version of the PSP game. For some reason, no one has the gameplay long play for the Japanese version on YouTube. They have all the cutscenes in Japanese, but I can't see in any review I found of the game whether or not there's a Japanese person saying activate combat mode or whether it's there or not. But there is in English, and it is the same dialogue. It's a lady called Shelley Sweeney in the original game, and the Reunion remake says activating combat mode. That's the only actor or actress that is the same in both versions.
That's incredible.
Just to put it out there.
And you are absolutely right. I have heard that more times than I care to admit. Is burned into my cerebellum.
Just thought I'd throw that one in there. That was quite funny, because I've done like a little table to compare them. Now, what I will jump in and say is that, and you've obviously talked to me in the past about how you're more tuned in with, say, like fandom website type stuff than I am, and I guess my bias has been more towards games magazines and stuff like that over the years. I didn't want to jump in on the bandwagon and like give any grief towards any of these actors because
by all means, if I find out that any of our listeners have been anything less than lovely and pleasant to these people, then I don't want you listening to this.
No, I totally. I just wanted to put that caveat in because I don't want to dunk on anyone's performance. We've taken the piss out of Genesis, but like Gak's performance was pretty good.
The actual performance itself, sublime. The words,
yeah, exactly. That's not. I mean, we can dunk on the writers. The writers, they know. We know. No, a point I'm making is that it comes down to preference, and it's probably a good time to jump and talking about like subs versus dubs and things like that, which is like tends to be an anime quite a lot, and we've
can be very contentious as well. Yeah,
it can be very contentious. I just wanted to make sure that just be on brand with us, that we make a note that we don't want to be gatekeepers on this stuff, because I remember over the years like trying to get involved and being told, oh, you're not a real fan because you don't like this version.
Yeah.
But what I will say is that I can understand the frustration of it not being the way you remember it being.
Yeah.
So the only real criticism I have of the Reunion project is that you haven't got the option to revert to the old dialogue. Now, you could argue that the new actors are technically better and it's not a very good old performance, which is an opinion, but at the same time, like, well, if I have a nostalgia for it, I'd love to be able to play with the old voices. Considering the fact that like voices and music, which is often you can toggle as well in these games, it's kind of your own interpretation of those characters a lot of the time, and even like the way things are presented. Obviously, like I've talked about Star Wars anyway already. Like Star Wars is a prime example where they've updated them with better sound and they've changed some of the visuals for the special editions and whatever, and put Hayden Christensen at the end of the Return of the Jedi and shit like that. Fine, but that's not the way I remember it, and I'd love to be able to watch the version I remember. Totally understand all that stuff, yeah? So that's my only real criticism of the project, because I don't think any of the voices are bad. I thought I'd throw that in there.
No, that's completely fair.
I do have some opinions.
Oh, let's hear them.
So I've got some characters that I've recorded and I've made my own opinion of who I think the best of them is. Not every character, and it'll be interesting to see what your take as well. So Zach, I don't have a problem with any of them. Okay. Now, I do quite like the old Rick Gomez as the original dub actor. He's got a bit of there's a little bit of nostalgia going on there, and some of the more memeable stuff, like Angie and stuff like that, is kind of nostalgic, But I will note that Caleb Pierce, who's obviously the new Zach, sounds a lot like Kenichi Suzumuru, I believe it is, who was the original actor in Japanese. If you listen to both of them side by side, he does an excellent... They sound very similar. I think it's quite interesting. So that's my take. Don't know what you think, whether you agree.
I'm with you, actually. I remember at the very beginning of Reunion being like, oh, shit, this isn't Gomez. Right, okay, I've got to readjust my world. Yeah. I think overall, I probably prefer Rick Gomez, but I think most of that is nostalgia. His performance really was absolutely impeccable. Gomez's voice was the best voice in the original Crisis Core, like hands down, in my opinion. But Caleb Pierce, I think, does a really good job, and he grew on me very quickly. It's also helped by the fact that Caleb Pierce himself actually looks like someone that I used to go to university with, so I have a soft spot for him.
Yeah, and I just wanted to, obviously, the caveat I put in before, I know that there's loads of videos online about, it ruins it, it's this new guy. And I'm like, you know what, poor guy, he's done an excellent job, Caleb Pierce. Angeal, I have to say that the Japanese voice for Angeal is just amazing if you have a chance to listen to it.
I've not actually heard the Japanese dub before.
There's a video on YouTube which goes through all the characters and it compares all the voices for certain lines.
To that later.
I'm going to try the pronunciation. Kazuhiko Inoue, fabulous voice performance there. The other two, meh for me. They're serviceable. But I will say Lazard, Stephen Marks in the original dub,
I think you were going to say Stephen Merchant.
Yeah, Stephen Merchant plays Lazard. Stephen Marks plays in the original. I think that he's a standout for me. Lazard's really, really good voice. It's like chocolate, his voice. Genesis, I've made a joke they all suck. No, they don't. It's just the dialogue. Poor Gact. Now, Aerith, I have to say that Brianna White absolutely nails it. Just kills it. Absolutely brilliant performance. I mean, obviously, she got performance of the year last year for
think that's right,
Rebirth.
yeah.
Like, oh my God, she's just Aerith. She just is, right?
It's also really interesting because Aerith has had so many different voice actors over the years. The fact that we're able to pick one and go, can we just have one definitive Aerith? And I'd be happy with it being Brianna.
Yeah, I think I can argue. Cisne is played by Kaylee Mills in the newer version as well, which is also fantastic as well. Really good standout performance. And Cloud as Cody Christian.
I love
Christian
our new Cloud, actually. I think Christian's a fucking excellent Cloud.
And Sephiroth as well. I'm going to pronounce his name right. Tyler Hoechlin, who plays Sephiroth in the remake project.
Right.
Oh my God, his voice is amazing. Like, he's a step up from the original.
I've got one note on the characters for you. The original voice actor for Aerith is a lady called Andrea Bowen. Do you know what her previous role in Final Fantasy was?
I don't, but I do have her name written down, so I did remember that. Just to point it out, I got the name ready, yes.
Because I got such a tickle out of this, because it was like, oh, she was in Advent Children, actually. Do you have any?
No, she wasn't.
Do you have any idea who she might have been in Advent Children?
Did she play Denzel?
No, she plays the girl with the Moogle.
Oh, of course she does. Of course she does. But if you said Denzel, I'd have taken my headset off and walked out. But,
I just think that was absolutely brilliant. Like, oh yeah, you're a Moogle girl, right? Time to play Aerith. Okay.
And also, this is the only time I will say this ever. Crispin Freeman plays Rude in the original dub.
Yes.
Also, I believe plays Rude in Advent Children. He's replaced by William Christopher Stevens in the reunion dub. It's the only time I'll ever say that I think Crispin Freeman is outperformed by someone, because it doesn't happen often. Notably, that Crispin Freeman plays the main character in Haruhi Suzumiya as a dub, and that is just an incredible performance. He's obviously also Togusa in Ghost in the Shell standalone complex as well.
Oh, of course he is.
What a performance! Yes. And he's the announcer in every fucking Final Fantasy game ever. He's always a TV announcer, right?
So I will note that going forward, for the third entry for the 7 remake game, the Japanese cast is going to have to change very slightly. Do you know why?
I don't actually know.
The voice actor for Reno passed away a couple of years ago.
Oh, that's a shame.
And that is the reason that Reno's role was actually diminished in Rebirth out of respect for the voice actor. I believe they actually toned his role down a little bit so they didn't have to recast him. I believe he probably will be recast in part 3. Obviously, Quentin Flynn was his original English voice. He has since been replaced. I don't know with who.
Arnie Pantoja.
Okay. I really love his performance as the new Reno. I wouldn't change it at all. But yeah, that is something to note, that while the original cast for Final Fantasy VII...
Kenji Fujiwara was the voice for Reno in Japanese.
Yeah, while the original 7 cast remains untouched, there is going to have to be one change, and I'm very sad for him. Rest in peace, and I hope his family is all right.
Yeah, I will say that as well. That's RIP there. Now, what I would just jump in as well is a bit of culture stuff here as well. That essentially, like, obviously, in Japan, obviously, animation and voice acting is a different game, because you can see with the culture of these are the same actors from 20 odd years ago. And that's. I don't know whether there's a union type approach there, or just a loyalty thing more than anything, because that's quite commonplace. I know, obviously, I've talked about Dragon Ball Z quite a lot in the past, and pretty much other than when these actors become older or pass away, unfortunately, like they get replaced by someone or whatever, they tend to keep the same actor throughout in Japan quite a lot of the time, unless the character then gets older and they replace them with an older actor. Sometimes that isn't the case. Sometimes they keep the actor and grow up with them. But I think it's interesting how it's taken the English voice acting a bit longer to catch up to that point where we're gonna let's have a consistent character, and that's I think that's what they've tried to do with the remake and reunion project, is to be more consistent and kind of tie in with that more Brianna White is Aerith, that kind of thing, which I think is pretty a clever way of doing it. Obviously, we've talked about Ben Starr a lot. Ben Starr being Clive, but he's also like an ambassador to the series because he's part of the family in a sense. I like that approach, and that seems very Japanese from a culture perspective, But at the same time, I understand that it's well worth remembering these original performances because they are important to people.
One final note before we move on then.
I've got one as well.
The voice actors for Zack and Aerith in the original Japanese, that is Kenichi Suzumura and Maya Sakamoto. They are actually married and they have children together.
How cool is that? That's so
I'm not
nice.
entirely sure if they actually met while they were doing Crisis Core
that's nice.
recordings, but I think they've actually recorded other things together. Yeah, I think it might have been 2011 they got married. They're
That's
still
really
together,
cool.
so that's really cute.
That's a nice little thing to add into the history of the game and stuff like that. That's cool. Good for them. Now, there is another character, and I think there's one or two characters, but there's another character that had no lines in the original version of the game, but had some lines in the reunion version.
Yes,
Do you know who that is?
that's Kunsel. That's my man.
That's not who I'm thinking
That's
of.
not Kunsel?
It's actually Tifa I'm thinking about.
Oh!
Tifa has a couple of lines, I believe, from what I've done. I mean, I've not gone through the games with the fine-tooth comb, but Tifa had a couple of lines in the reactor part. Apparently no lines in the original, but Ayumi Ito in Japanese, and of course Britt Baron in the English version. And let's be honest, Britt Baron just steals it as Tifa to me. Like, she's
She's a really
fabulous
good
as
actress.
Tifa.
They all are. They're all fantastic.
I know they are brilliant with Square Enix at getting voice actors. But yeah, I mean, that's my tale. I don't know. There's a few actors they add in. I've obviously not included Vice or flipping Nero,
No, we don't
even though they
talk
get
about
two
them.
fucking lines. We won't talk about them until next time on this thing we're doing. But okay, so that's it for the voice acting for me. Quite a lot of.
Yeah, we've had more trivia on voice actors this time than I think we've ever done before.
We've just never really got into it before, have we? I think it's probably worth doing that for future titles,
absolutely.
going in and digging into some more of the Japanese stuff and whatever. But yeah, that's it for voice cast. So I think all I've got really left to talk about now is the soundtrack.
Yes, I've been waiting for this.
Do you know the composer of this game?
Takeru Ishimoto.
There we go. I'm just flexing. I've got everyone's names written down for the first
I'm very
time ever.
proud of you, Jack.
So this guy started as a synthesizer program on Legend of Mana, which is obviously a Square title.
Yes.
But his first music credit, do you know what his first music credit was?
I don't have a clue, I'm afraid.
This will be another one for Brag Bag at some point. It is with our old friend Masayoshi Soken.
Ooh.
On a game called World Fantasy Star, I believe it's called.
Ooh, okay.
Now, World Fantasy Star is a Japanese exclusive football game
Okay.
from 2002. Now, the only thing I can think is that it was because Japan and South Korea hosted the World Cup in 2002.
Oh, did they really?
Yeah, they did. Yeah, I definitely know that. So I believe it may be because Japan were, jumping on the football bandwagon, but essentially
makes sense.
they did the music for that game. Now, the credits to the music that Ishimoto had before Crisis Core include Before Crisis and Last Order.
Yes.
So the soundtracks swing around those games quite a bit. If you watch Last Order, you'll notice the soundtrack's pretty much the same vibe and probably the same
It's
tracks.
very
as it is in-
difficult to extract one of these from the trio of those titles,
Yep.
actually. See, the thing is that you're completely right. The vibe across those titles, they might as well just be one continuous soundtrack. I think Last Order's soundtrack isn't even completely original. It is just everything's taken from Before Crisis. And
I
then
believe so,
one or
yeah.
two of those were remixed for Crisis Core. They're good tracks.
You can see a lot about what I was saying about how, versus 13 and 13,
Yes.
they were probably trying for the same approach and bit off a bit more than they could chew with the new hardware. So essentially, he's pretty much, in a manner of speaking, the compilation composer, really.
yeah.
I mean, other than Advent Children, which is obviously a lot of remixes of Nobuo's
Yes.
work, and of course the remake project, the core games, I mean, obviously you've got Dirge of Cerberus, which is another one we'll get to at another point. He also, and I've got to mention it again because we mentioned it before, The World Ends With You, he did that as a soundtrack,
did
which
he?
is
I didn't know that.
absolutely fantastic soundtrack, a brilliant soundtrack, and of course our pal Numura did the character designs for that game, so it's a very, in a way, Final Fantasy coded game. The designs look very similar to Before Crisis, my take. They also made, apparently it works on a game called Monotone. I can't find anything about Monotone online. I typed in Monotone game, and I'm like, where the fuck's that? I can't find Monotone as a game. But my review of the original soundtrack, I will say, we've never really done this before, but I thought I'd jump in and do it, is it's one of the best parts of the game.
I'll agree, actually. I think it's a really strong soundtrack.
Not just a strong soundtrack, but I think that he got the exam question because the music adds its own style for like Zack and Zack's combat, because Zack didn't really have a theme in the original game, but also remixes most of the important themes from Final Fantasy VII and plays tribute to 90s music, like trip-hop music and industrial music, which, was obviously just as much as a nostalgic trip for Final Fantasy VII as the era the game came out
Correct,
in.
yeah.
So I think very, very clever little bit of design. So we've obviously got Why by Ayaka, I believe is the name of the song that plays when
Oh my
Zack's
god,
been...
I couldn't listen to that track for like months after I finished the game.
Now, the music video for that exists on it. This will be another brag bag one, probably. It exists on like a random disc from Japan,
Okay.
which basically has Ayaka, I believe it is, walking through a train graveyard, getting on a train, and then sitting and singing the song as she drives on the train. Right, it's amazing. Go watch it. And then right at the end, it pans up to the moon. Brilliant, fantastic.
Doesn't get better than that, does it?
That doesn't get more Final Fantasy than that. Trains and moons, it's all we need. And of course, there are some obviously remix references to other Final Fantasy VII music. So they've got Opening bombing mission is played in a song called Memory Fragments DMW. Opening bombing mission is played on the beginning mission. Those Who Fight Further is played in a song called The Summoned. The normal battle theme is in a track in this game called Timely Ambush. Aerith's theme, of course, appears in A Flower Blooming in the Slums. I think that might be my favourite version of the song, to be honest with you.
Disagree. I prefer the original.
You not like it? Oh, well, I mean, yeah, obviously it's tied up with the game, but to listen to, I think this is my favourite version of the thing, personally. Shinra's theme obviously plays the Mako or the Marco or the Mako, or whatever you want to call it this year, controlling organisation. Anxiety, the song, plays in Final Fantasy VII, plays in a place called the Closed Off Village. One-Winged Angel, obviously, plays in a piece called The World's Enemy, which I think is a fucking fantastic name for a song. And there's a medley at the end of the game, which it's called Fulfilled Desire.
Oh, that's the
which
credits song, isn't it? That's a really good medley.
Includes the Final Fantasy VII theme, the da, 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 da. So essentially, you've got most of the big hitters. I mean, not every good track in Final Fantasy VII. Cosmo Canyon's not in there for obvious reasons, but it's the main core of the Final Fantasy VII, the leitmotifs from those games.
And then supplemented with quite a lot of original tracks as well, actually. What did you think of the original tracks?
Oh, I love them. I think they're fantastic. You've got the very moody, bassy stuff in Midgar, which is the industrial stuff, which kind of pays homage to the 90s industrial stuff that was going on at the time. Rockier combat tracks like Roaming in the Afternoon Sun. Brilliant, fantastic. And Under the Apple Tree, which is a sextet version of Succession, which is the main theme of Crisis Core.
I was surprised at how many piano tracks there were on the soundtrack, admittedly. They're not the most listenable to me, but they're not bad. I just prefer the rockier stuff.
The rockier stuff's really good, and then there's the trip-hoppy stuff in a song called Wilderness of Desertion, I believe it is. So many different styles. I think you just nailed the exam question. It's some of those things that I'd happily listen to, like most Final Fantasy music on its own, without the game. And I think it just hits for me. And I think it's got a lot to do with the fact that I love all of his other work, especially in World Ends With You. It's really fun music, and it also understands the theme of the world really, really well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, for me, the Crisis Core soundtrack, you're completely right. It fits the feel of Midgar, and it fits the feel of being an excitable soldier going out into the war front and all of the downtime that comes with it. Like, you're right. Nails the exam question. As much as I like the soundtrack for Before Crisis and Last Order, I don't think that same soundtrack fits for the Turks. I think they need something a little bit more sedate.
Yeah, no, I get you.
However, from a gameplay perspective and like needing that interactivity, definitely works. Definitely 100% works. Really, really good. Go listen to Desperate Crisis. Go listen to Blackbeat. Go listen to Theme of Elfate. They are such good tracks.
Fabulous stuff. It's good that we did a little soundtrack section this time. I think we probably should bring these in a bit more often. Yeah, obviously, I didn't want to get too into that. And this is the chord progression that plays over this. We just talk about how it themes in with the game.
Out of interest, before we completely finish up then, obviously we've already talked about Ayaka and the song Why. What did you think of that song?
Oh, I think it's good. I don't think it's the best vocal theme in the series. That's still eyes on me for me, I'm afraid. But One-Winged Angel technically is the best vocal theme in the series, but I do like Why.
Okay. I was only wondering because I know that actually the Final Fantasy games of this era, they kind of tended to have a very romantic pop ballad credit song. So you had the ending track for Final Fantasy XII was in the same kind of vibe, very different from the rest of the soundtrack. And then I know with 13, a couple of years later, they did a similar thing with not quite in the same slow ballady style, but it was very much changed up in the English version where we got Leona Lewis's track. I'm really glad they've moved away from doing that. Florence and the Machine can stay for 15 though. That was a great cover. Yeah.
Or the credits to Final Fantasy 16. If you beat the game Platinum, Ben Starr sings a song. Yeah, go and play it. Go and beat the whole thing. Play it. Trust me. Beat the whole thing on Platinum. Go and find those. He does. He comes. He sings a song at the end.
How much do you think he'd ask for a cameo to do that? Because I'm tempted. Can you make that my birthday gift this year, Jack?
Yeah, just get him a cameo to sing flipping
My Star.
Get him to sing Why. Get him to sing Why by.
No, it would have to be Eyes on Me because he'd know that one.
For fuck's sake! Just sing it as a duet. I'll get him to sing it as a duet with me.
I eagerly await the end of the year.
Oh my god, that would be fun. Let's make it happen, Mol. So that I had to pay homage to the soundtrack because it's always, just to tie it in with what we talked about at the beginning with personal memories, I've always really liked the soundtrack of this game because I tie it in with having the PSP and the fact that, even taking graphics out of it, the fact that Sony have obviously been synonymous with fantastic sound and like Sony Walkmans and headphones and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I've always pretty much had Sony stuff over the years when I was younger. The fact the PSP could play like MP3 quality music was just mind-blowing at the time. So really good stuff. All right, brilliant. I enjoyed talking to you about Crisis Core, probably more than I enjoy playing the game. So where can everyone find you online, Mol?
As usual, I can be found at Adramalek on both Twitter and Blue Sky, which I use very, very sparingly, and of course the EXP required Twitter and Blue Sky handles. Also, what about yourself, Jack?
Yep, same for me with the EXP Required stuff on Twitter and Blue Sky. We're also on YouTube. EXP Required or EXP Podcast, I believe, is our handle. And I'm JackieBoy34, most places, but at JackMullen8 on Twitter for now. Fantastic. See you later, everyone.
Thank you very much for listening. Bye.